Chapter 1899. The handsome young man's eyes were full of sincerity. He looked at the war goddess like she was a treasure. His eyes were a little lost, but there was also some anticipation. He carefully probed, his hand also trembling in the air. "Star-Lord Yi, what is going on?" The war goddess felt rather uncomfortable from the young man's gaze. She took a few steps back, then raised her eyebrows towards Yi Zichen, and smiled half-jokingly. As expected of Star-Lord Ye's friend. "Why do you like to hit on people so much?" Yi Zichen was speechless, then rolled his eyes. "What do you mean? What do you mean my friend likes to hit on me? Isn't Star-Lord Yi a lover?" The war goddess twitched her mouth at Yi Zichen, then cracked her fingers with a smile. "I don't think I can count the number of lovers that Star-Lord Yi has on one hand, right? It's just that the way your friend strikes up a conversation is too old-fashioned." Unable to refute, thinking about the number of women he had by his side, it was just as the war goddess had said. He couldn't even count them with one hand. Yi Zichen rubbed his nose, then waved towards the handsome young man. "Yuan, come back here." The handsome young man slowly approached Yi Zichen, but he continued to stare at the war goddess with a confused look in his eyes. He looked really familiar. He wasn't trying to strike up a conversation, nor was he lying. He really felt that the goddess of war looked very familiar. It was as if they had met somewhere before. They had played before. "You little brat, why do you know how to flirt after advancing? That's the war goddess over there. I didn't even know her before, so how could you possibly know her?" Even though that was what he said, it was clear from the young man's eyes that he was still unwilling to give up. Sigh, Yi Zichen shook his head helplessly, then smiled apologetically at the war goddess. "I'm sorry, this fellow is the upgraded version of my soul Pearly Yuan, the soul Pearly Yuan. Most of the reason I was able to break free from the soul gem was because of him. No wonder I sense something passing through the void of space here," the war goddess said. "That's it," Yi Zichen smiled. "He wasn't here at the start, so he came in time. Actually, he used to be a rather cute little guy, but he grew up after his promotion. Perhaps he had reached puberty, so he was more of a war goddess. Please bear the consequences." "It's fine." The goddess of war waved her hand generously, but she noticed that the artifact spirit of the Yuan divine pearl was still staring at her. It was as if it wanted to imprint her image deeply into its heart, or perhaps it wanted to awaken a memory that had been sealed for a long time. "You're not done yet." When Yi Zichen saw that the Yuan divine pearl was unwilling to let it go, he patted its head, but couldn't bear to recall it back into his sea of consciousness. The single origin soul chose to level up for Yi Zichen's safety. He was still his old self. Yi Zichen could tell from his clear eyes that he was still soul Pearly Yuan. Xian Ji had once said that she would do her best to preserve soul Pearly Yuan's memories, but from the looks of it, not much of it had been preserved. The only possibility left behind was to let the advanced version of Divine Pearl of Yuan know who was the person he wanted to protect. As a result, Yi Zichen was actually somewhat indulgent with the Yuan Divine Pearl. Not only did he not blame the Yuan Divine Pearl, but he also wanted to find a girlfriend who was the artifact spirit of a divine artifact when he was free. In the blink of an eye, several days passed. It was always daytime inside the secret realm, so the people inside had no idea how long they'd been there. Yang Jian told Yi Zichen that almost half a month had passed outside the secret realm. Only then did they realize that they'd been wandering around the entrance for so long. Gu Xuanda didn't disappoint. He brought the Green Rain clansman's corpse back to Green Rain Planet. It had to be said that he had the potential to be a swindler. After bringing back the corpses of the Green Rain clansmen, he wept and wept. He made up stories about their travels in the outer realms and told them how deep their feelings were. Unfortunately, they'd encountered an enemy from another race in the universe. In order to protect him, the Green Rain clansmen had perished together with that enemy. At the time, the entire Green Rain clan was shocked. They never would have guessed that there were other races outside the universe. They were terrified and uneasy, but Gu Xuanda pushed the dead Green Rain clansman into the position of hero. Then he took out the resources he'd brought from the first era and placed them in front of the Green Rain clansman. On the surface, he said that this was compensation for the guilt he felt in his heart, and he also said that he wanted to nurture the overall strength of his brother, the Green Rain clan, so that they could one day avenge him. The people were in an uproar. Countless people from the Green Rain clan shouted for revenge, so Gu Xuanda easily picked out a candidate for the puppet regime. Before he left, the people of the Green Rain nation worshipped him like a deity, and the entire nation sent him off in celebration. Yang Jian, the great sage, and the others were amazed when they heard the news. They praised Gu Xuanda's ability to handle matters. If they were there, they might not have been able to do what he did. Of course, Yang Jian and the great sage didn't stay idle during this period of time. Yang Jian and the great sage returned to the era and found a group of formation masters and above. There were a total of 20 formation masters and above, and they used soul gems as formation cores to set up a formation array that covered billions of kilometers. Illusory array. There were also many offensive and defensive arrays. It could be said that the entrance to the Milky Way universe mystic plane was completely surrounded by arrays. Even if an outsider race wanted to enter the Milky Way galaxy through the universe secret realm, he would first have to taste the god. This was a baptism of many formations. It took several months to set up the spiritual formations, and the gods of the outside realm and the first era sent in all sorts of materials. With the support of the formations, the Milky Way galaxy's explorers could explore further, and no longer just explore the entrance. Yi Zichen, Elder Lin, and the war goddess also watched over the entrance. They'd been living a peaceful life, and Yi Zichen even wondered if he really needed to oversee the place. He wanted to go back to the first era to take a look. Until, Monkey, do you see that glowing object over there? Yang Jian opened his heavenly eye and transmitted to the great sage. I see it, but there seems to be someone else next to it? Judging from his appearance, he doesn't look like one of us, nor is he from the outside realm. That's him. Chapter 1900. The Outer Realm God Race. Ever since the Divine Race and the Era Alliance headed to the Universe Mystic Realm, the Divine Race and the Era Race had been living in harmony. Even though the God Race had God King Emotion and God King Destruction, they did not dare to recklessly attack the Epic Era because of the existence of the God Sovereign. However, due to the news of the Universe Secret Realm being released, the gods who knew about the other races in the universe galaxy did not dare to slack off. The entire God race was in a tense atmosphere. Many gods were also racing against time to raise their cultivation levels. In the upper realm, the God race, the Northern God race, was known as the race with the strongest battle power among the God race outside the realm. With the God of Destruction Palace as the center and the God King Yale as the leader, the gods in the God clan were all iron-blooded warriors who could fight against 10. What happened to the Divine Palace? While the other true gods were racing against time to increase their strength, the soldiers around the Shrine of Destruction looked at the majestic shrine with fear in their eyes. Naturally, they knew about the news of the universe secret region. They also wanted to make use of this time to cultivate. However, the aura emanating from the surroundings of the Divine Palace made it impossible for them to cultivate peacefully. Countless gods gathered in groups of 2s and 3s, and the content of their discussion was all about the godly Palace of Destruction. It's been almost half a month. I've gone to the Divine Palace to ask the Master Gods, but they haven't gotten an answer. They just said that they don't need to care about the Divine King's matters. Yeah, that's what we said when we asked. Just what is Lord Yale doing? Counting the days, it seems like the time to seal the deity sea has already passed. Could it be that Lord Yale has gained some insights in the past few months? Most of these people were true gods without titles, and they were all around the higher deity realm. At their level, there was no way for them to meet Yale directly. Naturally, they had no way of knowing many things about God King of Destruction Yale. What they didn't realize was that even the sovereigns who were able to interact with Yale didn't know. What Yale said to the true gods was just an excuse. As for what Yale was doing, none of the true gods knew. The only thing they knew was that the Divine King had been in seclusion for half a month. As for the details, right now, the person who was favored was Song-an of the Song family. Overgods like them could only stay within the Divine Palace, so how could they know the exact situation of the God King? I wonder what His Majesty is doing. The chief god within the Divine Palace muttered. How can we spy on the king's actions? We just need to wait here. The other overgod smiled gently before a mysterious light flashed through his eyes. He purposefully suppressed his voice and said, "Sai, did you know? He said that those people who went to the universe secret region all found treasures." "What treasure?" "I heard that it was a gemstone. That gemstone has an evil nature, and is capable of controlling the minds of sovereigns. Now that the gemstone belongs to Ji-Yuan Star-Lord, I'm afraid it will be difficult for us to do anything to Ji-Yuan in the future." "Are you serious? To be able to directly control the minds of sovereigns," this sounded rather fake. One had to know that the Overgod realm was already the peak of the entire Milky Way galaxy. If this realm was converted to the realm of the epoch, it would be half-step transcendence. If this gem was really that powerful, forget about attacking the epoch era. Even the epoch Star Lord wouldn't come looking for trouble with the God race. Not bad. If you don't believe me, you can ask the War Goddess when she returns. Don't let the king know about this. Because of the alliance between the God race and the epoch era, the king is already furious enough. Just as the two overgods were conversing, a ripple appeared at the exit of a secret region within the God Palace. Yale frowned as he walked out. At this moment, he still couldn't sense any god power ripples from his body. King. The people guarding the secret region weren't the overgods under Yale, but the Song family head Song-an that Yale recently doted on, and one of his clansmen. The two of them knelt on the ground and kowtowed. Yale glanced at them and said, "Has anything happened outside recently?" "King, the Epic Star Lord obtained a treasure in the universe secret region. It's a hidden threat to us." Song-an knelt on the ground and said, "Is that so? His luck isn't bad." Yale revealed a look of disdain and didn't ask any further. Instead, he lectured the two overgods beside him. "Let me tell you, your own strength is the most important at any time. Treasures are external objects at the end of the day. People who rely on external objects will never be able to reach the peak." "King is right," Song-an said. "Before this seat went into seclusion, have you dealt with the matter that I instructed you to do?" Yale squinted his eyes and gave off an immense pressure. Song-an swallowed his saliva and nodded heavily. "The emotional God King is already waiting in the back hall." Recently, due to Song-an being doted on, the Song family's power was slowly rising. Song-an, who had finally grasped this opportunity with great difficulty, couldn't let it slip from his hands no matter what. He had to do everything to the extreme so that Yale couldn't find any fault with it. Only then would Yale continue to put him in an important position. "No one else knows, right?" Yale said. "You should know that with us two God Kings meeting at this time, it's hard to avoid certain people. King, don't worry. No one knows that the emotional God King is here. Even the overgods under you don't know." Song-an swore. "That's right. This seat is at ease with you handling things." Yale lightly patted Song-an's shoulder. Before he finished speaking, the emotional god King Orbis had already appeared in front of the secret region. Song-an took half a step back. The two god kings looked at each other. Both sides didn't say anything. Yale then looked at Song-an. "This seat doesn't want anyone to know about this, be it before or in the future. Don't worry, he's my eldest son. He's very tight-lipped and won't speak carelessly." Song-an smiled apologetically as he looked at the young man beside him. Yale nodded meaningfully and entered the secret region. The emotional god King Orbis also entered the secret region after a slight hesitation. Only now did Song Un let out a long sigh. Accompanying a king was like accompanying a tiger. Working for Yale was 10,000 times scarier. No one knew when the temperamental Yale would become unhappy and his head would fall to the ground. Father. The young man outside the secret region glanced at Song Un and said, "What are Lord Yale and Lord Orbis doing? Why do they have to be so secretive?" The God Emperor. Shut up. Chapter 1901. Song Clan. It was once a peak clan and had a myriad of glory. It had experienced glory, but it had also fallen to the bottom. For tens of thousands of years, or even hundreds of thousands of years, Song Un, the patriarch of the Song family, had struggled in the low end for countless generations, and it was not easy for him to seize the opportunity to rise. He had to execute the task that Yale had given him perfectly. He knew very well that he only needed to be a mute who only knew how to do things. He didn't need to consider anything else. He couldn't tolerate anyone making the slightest mistake and letting this opportunity slip from his hands, including his heirs. Song Yi, don't destroy the Song clan's future. Song An's reprimand made the young man bow his head timidly. The young man had always been the pride of the Song clan. His talent was given the hope of the Song clan's rise. In the clan, Song Un doted on him. He had never seen Song Un since he was young. He had such a serious expression. He realized that he had said something wrong. He didn't expect that his unintentional question would cause such a huge reaction from Song Un. Time passed, and the sun and moon alternated. The father and son of the Song clan remained silent. No one knew how long they had been guarding the secret realm. No one was allowed to take half a step closer to the secret realm. Even a moth couldn't appear within their range of surveillance. During this period of time, emotional Divine King, who had been invited to the Divine Palace, didn't leave the secret realm. The two Divine Kings of the Shun clan stayed in the secret realm. No one knew what they were discussing. Song Un. A ripple appeared at the entrance of the secret realm. Destruction Divine King Yale stepped out. Yale, who had been discussing in the secret realm for several days, was hale and hearty. He didn't look tired at all. Not only that, Song Un, who was standing outside, seemed to have a vague feeling. Yale's aura seemed to have surpassed the scope of Divine King. However, he was the only one who walked out of the secret realm this time. Emotional Divine King Orbis didn't walk out with him. If one recalled, when they first came to the Divine Palace to discuss matters with Destruction Divine King Yale, it was the Second Era. They relied on Pleasure Divine King. The Demon Emperor didn't seem to have left the secret realm. This inevitably made Song Un suspicious. However, this thought was discarded as soon as it appeared. Don't think. Don't ask. The God King of Destruction had made it very clear from the very beginning. He had many choices. Why did he choose Song Un to work for him? He wanted Song Un to listen to him. He didn't need to think about these things. For the future of the Song enterprise, being obedient was enough. Your Majesty. The moment Yale stepped out of the secret realm, Song Un and his eldest son knelt on the ground. Yale leisurely stretched his waist with a smile that was like a spring breeze on his face. When Song Un saw this scene, he naturally had to flatter him. Your Majesty, you're in a good mood. It's very good. Yale pursed his lips and patted Song An's shoulder with a smile. You've done well recently. I intend to support your Song clan, but, support? When he heard this, the burning desire in Song An's eyes had reached the limit. All along, he had been waiting for this one sentence of support. His eldest son was very outstanding, a rare genius of the god race. However, he was still too young. Growing to a chief god required time and opportunity. Moreover, even if he became a chief god, how could he compare to the God King's favor? Your Majesty, the Song clan will definitely sacrifice our lives for your Majesty. As long as your Majesty needs it, the Song clan will forever be loyal to your Majesty. We will be your majesty's sharpest spear, your majesty's strongest backing. Song-an couldn't wait to declare his loyalty to Yale. Yale watched all of this with a faint smile and patted him on the shoulder. Don't be so anxious. Since I'm asking you to do this, I naturally have my eyes on you and your clan. Moreover, your clan is originally in the northern god race. Are you saying that if I don't support you, you won't be my spear and shield? Your Majesty, this subordinate. I know what you mean. He waved his hand, indicating that Song-an didn't need to be too anxious. Shortly after, Yale glanced at Song-an's eldest son, then back at Song-an. However, this time, Yale's expression was a little more serious. Are you sure that the Song clan will pledge their loyalty to me no matter what? The Song clan is willing to sacrifice our lives for your Majesty, no matter what. Song-an said seriously. Good. Yale laughed in satisfaction. He looked at Song-an meaningfully for a long time. Remember what you just said. As soon as he finished speaking, Yale strode toward the front hall of the palace with his hands behind his back. Song-an followed closely behind him, smiling apologetically. Your Majesty, this subordinate will see you off. For a moment, the secret realm of the Shrine of Destruction regained its usual peace. With Yale and Song-an's departure, only Song-an's eldest son was left to guard the place. Song-yi was very young. As the clan leader of the Song clan, Song-an was actually not too late to marry. However, Song-an, who had always been involved in the future of the Song clan, had never taken romance to heart. As a result, tens of thousands of years after his marriage, his level had stagnated at half-step lord level, unable to progress any further. The elders in the clan had also urged him to give birth earlier. Only then did he choose to let his wife conceive a child for him. Therefore, Song-yi was actually not even 18 years old yet. Young people were always curious about the unknown. Song-yi, who stood in front of the secret realm, had his eyes fixed on the entrance. Perhaps he was curious about what was inside the secret realm, or perhaps Song-an's reprimand had pissed him off. He thought about how the godly king of emotion was also inside. If he could form a relationship with the godly king of emotion and become his disciple, the Song clan's status would rise even higher. His father, Song-an, would not have to tread on thin ice in front of the godly king of destruction, Yale. Serving him. Unable to suppress the impulse in him any longer, Song-yi decided to enter the secret realm to take a look. It would be fine as long as he got out before Yale returned. Perhaps the godly king of emotion would really take a liking to him. By then, the Song clan would really return to its peak. There were no seals in the secret realm. Perhaps Yale did not expect anyone to dare barge into the secret realm of the shrine. Song-yi entered. He was filled with anticipation to meet the godly king of emotion. He had even thought of what he would say to the godly king of emotion when they met. However, when he entered the interior, he was stunned. Before Song-an, who had sent the godly king of destruction away, returned to the secret realm, the task assigned to him by the godly king of destruction had been completed. He was told to return to the clan and wait for further instructions. He wanted to come back and take Song-yi away. However, he did not see Song-yi before he returned to the secret realm. Until he heard a burst of, a scream. It came from inside the secret realm. Only then did he notice that the entrance of the secret realm was not completely closed. He secretly scolded Song-yi for being too insensible. He carefully looked around and made sure that there were no surveillance measures here. Then, he braced himself and entered the secret realm. Inside. During the period of entering the secret realm, he had also thought of what he would say if Song-yi angered the godly king of emotion. He even thought of teaching Song-yi a good lesson after he brought him out and make him face the wall. Emotion. Chapter 1902. For the gods of the outer realm, everything that had happened to the God clan recently was hard to understand. First, the outer realm God clan had formed an alliance with the Epic Era. Then, a large number of Outer Realm God Clan Lord-level experts had mysteriously left. Now the Divine Palace, which had never been guarded before, now had a few more guards. These guards were mostly from the Angel Clan. What puzzled them even more was that there were a few outsiders from the Epic Era among them. Judging from the guards' daily behavior, the Angel Clan seemed to be led by the Epic Era. The tight defense of the Divine Palace made many of the true gods suspicious. In terms of strength, the Divine Emperor was the well-deserved number one in the entire Milky Way. No one in the countless planes could threaten his safety. Therefore, in the past, the Divine Palace only had one building. Now that such a tight defense had appeared outside the Divine Palace, did it mean that the Divine Emperor was facing some kind of threat, or that something had happened to the Divine Emperor himself? If that was the case, it would be extremely shocking news to the gods of the Outer Realm. There are quite a lot of people. Yale, who had arrived outside the Divine Palace, stopped and looked into the distance. He estimated that there were at least 100 people loitering outside the Divine Palace. The weakest among them was a four-winged angel of the Angel Clan, which was the higher god realm. There were also many over-god realm experts. This level of vigilance made Yale even more certain of his thoughts. He slowly walked toward the Divine Palace. Stop! Not long after, a thunderous shout exploded in Yale's ears. Not long after, 5 angels with 4 wings on their backs landed in front of him. Their auras surged as they stared at Yale below. God King of Destruction? Since you know who I am, how dare you block my way? Yale looked up at the angels in the sky, his eyes unfriendly. Don't think that you can do whatever you want to the God King just because your angel clan isn't under the God Clan's management. Not to mention you, even if your king comes here, he can only be on the same level as me. Get out of my way. I have something to discuss with the Divine Emperor. The angels didn't budge an inch. Yale's brows sank even more. Hey, isn't this the God King of Destruction? Why do you have time to come to the Divine Palace? Suddenly, a chuckle appeared in the air. Next, the Venerable of Numinous Treasure, Gu Shan, and Bai Haoyu of the Bai family, whose clan Yi Zichen had once exterminated, appeared before Yale. Interesting. There are actually people from the Epic Era outside the Divine Palace. Yale snorted. I'm really sorry, we were ordered to stay here. Actually, we're too lazy to stay here, but we can't dissuade our Star Lord. The Venerable of Lingbao smiled bitterly. Whether you're willing or not has nothing to do with me. Hurry up and get out of the way. I want to see the Divine Emperor. Sorry. Although the Venerable One's smile was a little apologetic, his eyes were so firm that there was no doubt about it. Era's 3 experts were like a mountain blocking Yale's path to the Divine Palace. The 5 angel clansmen that had appeared first also fell behind them. They had no intention of leaving. No? Yale roared angrily. God King, please calm down. The Venerable of Numinous Treasure laughed. Didn't I say earlier that we don't want to? However, our mission is to stay here and prevent anyone from disturbing the Divine Emperor's cultivation. Don't make things difficult for us. Just wait for our Star Lord to return. Tell him? Since when did your Era's Star Lord have the right to interfere in our god race's affairs? The Venerable One and the others laughed helplessly, but said nothing. Yale's fury only intensified. At that moment, Gu Shan, the head of the Gu clan, spoke up. I wonder what you'd like to tell the Divine Emperor, Your Majesty? Why should this king tell you? It seems to me that you're in a hurry. If you tell us, we can report it to our superiors, said Gu Shan softly. I won't tell you. Then don't even think about going in. Before Yale could finish his sentence, Old Master Gu had already spoken up. Yale, who was being treated in such a manner, clenched his fists tightly. He breathed heavily through his nostrils, and his clenched fists were trembling violently. Even so, he couldn't release any ripples of energy from his body. He was just like an ordinary person. He was furious, but there was nothing he could do. I want to ask the Divine Emperor why the seal on my divine sea hasn't been lifted even though the 3-month deadline has passed. I need an explanation from the Divine Emperor and the King of Laws. Yale clenched his fists tightly as if he'd been humiliated. His eyes were bloodshot, and his words were squeezed out through his teeth. How about it? Are you satisfied? As soon as he finished speaking, Yale shouted again with bloodshot eyes. The Angel clan members couldn't help but raise their brows. The Venerable of Numinous Treasure and the others looked Yale up and down several times. Get out of the way! Yale bellowed angrily again. The gazes of the Angel clansmen in front of him froze for a moment, and then they made way for him. Almost at the same time, the Venerable of Lingbao and the others' eyes flashed, and they also made way. Humph! Yale snorted and strode toward the Divine Palace, but he stopped after a few steps and said angrily, "What do you want? What on earth do you want? The Divine Emperor has already agreed to let me in, so why are you still following behind me? Can't we just want to go in?" The Venerable One laughed like a scoundrel. "The Divine Emperor has indeed agreed to let you in, but he didn't say that we can't follow. So what if we're following you? Are we in your way? Enter your Divine Palace. We'll go with us. We shouldn't be a hindrance to each other." "You?" Yale trembled with anger. He glared at the Venerable One and the others for a long time. "Follow me if you want to." Yale quickened his pace as if he wanted to shake off the Venerable One of Lingbao and the others. However, he couldn't use his divine power. No matter how fast he walked, he couldn't shake off the Venerable One and the others, who were half-step away from the transcendent realm. Along the way, the Venerable One and the others followed Yale all the way to the Divine Palace's gate. The guards at the gate saw that Yale must have received the Divine Emperor's message, so they opened the gate and retreated to the sides. Humph! In front of the gate, Yale snorted again. He ignored the Venerable One and the others behind him, and walked straight into the Divine Palace. There's a problem. Chapter 1903. The God King of Destruction was the second most powerful existence in the Outerium celestial race. But he entered the Divine Palace under the surveillance of the guards. Yale's face didn't look too good along the way, but he couldn't be blamed. He wanted to meet the God King, but he was guarded like a thief. More importantly, he couldn't resist and could only endure in silence. Not to mention a God King like him, even those with a bit of status in the celestial race would be displeased. "How long are you going to follow me?" Yale couldn't bear it any longer. Lingbao shrugged and chuckled behind him. He didn't meet Yale's eyes at all. "Just you wait. Sooner or later, you won't be able to laugh anymore." Yale's eyes flashed with malice as he turned around and knocked on the door in front of him. "Your Majesty." Not long after, the door was gently pulled open. What came into view was the Angel King of the Angel tribe. Seeing Yale, Venerable Lingbao, and the others outside the room, the Angel King nodded at them first, and then looked at Yale with a smile. God King of Destruction. Yale was always observant of such minor details. From being intercepted by the angel race on his way to the Divine Palace, to being humiliated by Lingbao and the others, to being ignored by the Angel King, everything was fuel for his anger, making the fire in his heart burn fiercely. He didn't try to hide his anger. Whether it was the Angel King in front of the door or Lingbao and the others behind him, they could all feel his anger and surging blood energy. "Good. That's great." Glaring fiercely at the Angel King saw the resentment in his eyes, as if he wanted to peel off his skin and pull out his tendons. But that was all Yale could do. Apart from venting his anger with his eyes, he couldn't do anything else. Therefore, the Angel King didn't take it to heart. After noticing Yale's anger, he was still talking to Lingbao. They communicated with each other with their eyes. Creak. Yale clenched his teeth and clenched his fists. This time, he didn't communicate with the Angel King. Instead, he shouted at the God King in the room with a voice mixed with anger. "Your Majesty, can I go in?" The room was silent for a long time. Then, there was a soft sigh. "Come in." After receiving the confirmation, Yale didn't hesitate at all. He straightened his body and fiercely bumped the Angel King's shoulder with his shoulder, then walked out of the room. The moment he entered, the Venerable One and the others followed him into the Divine Emperor's room. After entering the room, Yale went straight to the bed. On the bed, the Emperor was covered with a quilt and sat against the headboard. Yale gently bowed to him. "Greetings, Your Majesty." "Sit." The Emperor God pointed to a chair that seemed to have been prepared beforehand and motioned for Yale to sit down. On the bed, the God Emperor's face was pale and bloodless. When he spoke, there was not much energy. All of this fell into Yale's ears. Not only that, but there was also a strong smell of medicine in the Emperor's room. This series of events told Yale that the Divine Emperor's injuries were definitely not healed yet. However, all of this was only on the surface. Yale was still a little cautious, and did not completely confirm the thoughts in his heart. Only the heavens knew if the Divine Emperor was doing this on purpose to confuse him and make him make mistakes. With these thoughts in mind, Yale took out a jade bottle and placed it on the bedside of the Divine Emperor. "I've long heard that Your Majesty was heavily injured. I've been very worried and wanted to visit you. Unfortunately, the Angel King's clansmen had rejected me and the Emotional King. Although I was worried, I could only leave. I obtained this divine pill from the planar wars. It has a miraculous effect on both internal and external injuries, so I've been reluctant to use it. Now, I present this divine pill to Your Majesty. I hope you will recover soon." "Thank you." The Divine Emperor nodded with a smile. He didn't look at the divine pill for long. "You must have other matters to discuss with me, right? As you can see, I'm not in good condition. If you have something to say it quickly. I won't be able to hold on any longer. I do have something to ask, but—" Yale wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. He glanced at the Angel King and the Venerable of Lingbao. The Angel King is one of the upper echelons of the celestial race. There's nothing to hide. The Venerable One and the others are also the Astral Lord's trusted aides. They're not outsiders. You? No. Before the Divine Emperor could finish his words, Yale said firmly, "If they were here, this subordinate would not say it no matter what." The Divine Emperor's eyes flashed. Shortly after, he glanced at the Angel King and the Venerable Lord of Numinous Treasure. After seeing the Angel King nod, the Divine Emperor withdrew his gaze. "Very well. You may leave." The people in the room bowed to the Divine Emperor one by one and left. After exiting the room, the Venerable One frowned and sent a voice transmission to the Angel King. "How can he come out just like that? There's something very wrong with your God King of Destruction." "So what?" "This is the Divine Emperor's decision." The Angel King stood in the hallway outside the room and said, "You should have tested him already. Didn't you feel any fluctuations of his divine power?" The Venerable One and the others shook their heads. In fact, everything they did to Yale just now was to provoke him, to see if they could make him reveal some flaws. If Yale released his divine power out of anger, they wouldn't let him see the Divine Emperor no matter what. "I didn't sense it either." The Angel King followed up with a telepathic message. "Just now I used my holy power to carefully investigate his surroundings. I know Yale's personality very well. As long as he's angered, his power will involuntarily leak out. Kugang just now when I ignored him, he could only vent his anger like usual and let his chi and blood churn. But he met the Demon Emperor and the Emotional God King not long ago," the Venerable One said. Yale certainly didn't know that everything about him had been monitored by the Divine Emperor Palace. Song swore that no one would know, but he was also under the Divine Emperor Palace's surveillance. When did the Emotional God King and the Demon Emperor enter the Divine Palace of Destruction? Where did they enter from, and still haven't come out? The Divine Emperor Palace knew all of this. "That's what I'm worried about." The Angel King's eyes revealed a trace of seriousness. Currently, the Divine Emperor was most worried about the emotional God King, the Destruction God King, and the Second Era's Demon Emperor. Coincidentally, the three of them had a secret discussion, after which Yale went to the Divine Emperor Palace. All of this made the Angel King and the others feel strange. Chapter 1904. A long silence lingered in the Emperor's bedroom. The God Emperor, who was sitting on the bed, and the God King of Destruction, who was sitting on the chair, seemed to have reached a tacit understanding. Neither of them looked at the other. The God Emperor was looking at the chaos of the outer realm's celestial race outside the window, while the God King of Destruction's gaze was constantly scanning the room. The two did not disturb each other, as if the other did not exist in the other's world. "Are you waiting for me to speak?" After a long time, the God Emperor stopped looking out the window and glanced at the God King of Destruction. There was nothing special in his eyes, and his tone was very gentle, like a dying patient who wanted to rest as soon as possible, urging others to finish what they wanted to say so that they could rest as soon as possible. The God Emperor took the initiative to break the silence in the room, causing the God King of Destruction's gaze to land on the God Emperor. "I haven't said anything, but I'm a little confused." Yale's gaze was pure. The God Emperor on the bed had a puzzled look on his face. Then, Yale continued, "This subordinate has served the God race for 100,000 years, right?" "Yes." The Divine Emperor nodded without hesitation. In the history of the celestial race, God King of Destruction Yale could be considered a rising star of the celestial race. He belonged to the same generation as the Liberty Divine King, and his peerless talent attracted the attention of the Protoss. At that time, not only did the God race produce two God Kings, but the Qing clan and the Wei clan also produced many geniuses. They were also given the title of God race in that era. The Golden Generation. Ever since the fall of the Darkness God King, the position of the Outerium God race was no longer as secure as before. Countless planes coveted the position of the Outer Realm God race, and the position of the God race's God nation was shaken. It was also their appearance that allowed the Outer Realm God race to catch a breather and regain their position as the leader of the myriad races. Roughly speaking, Yale had been the God King of the God race for 100,000 years. In these 100,000 years, this subordinate may have some areas that dissatisfied you, but can this subordinate be considered conscientious and conscientious for the God race? Yale asked again. That's a little too much. The God Emperor smiled benevolently. You might be a bit violent, but I know that this is the influence of the Destruction Godhead on you. This Empress has never been dissatisfied with you. You have truly misunderstood this Empress. As for what you said about being cautious and conscientious, that's only natural. If it weren't for you, the God race might not have existed until now, and the races of the other planes wouldn't be so afraid of the God race. All in all, your subordinate's merits outweigh his faults, right? Yale said. Hearing that, the Divine Emperor nodded and affirmed Yale's words. In the face of the God Emperor's reply, Yale could vaguely see tears glistening in his eyes. That kind of feeling was as if he had dedicated his whole life to the imperial court, admitted that he had been misunderstood by the people of the world, but received the Emperor's affirmation. A sense of contentment in his heart. This scene lasted for a long time, and Yale's eyes instantly turned ferocious. Since that's the case, why do you still want to continue sealing this subordinate's divine sense? This roar was like that of a wild beast from the depths of the abyss. Yale, who did not have any divine power to vent, used the anger in his heart to create a strong wind in the room, causing the bookshelves in the room to sway left and right. The wind blew against the God Emperor's face, but he didn't use any divine power to defend himself. Instead, he allowed the wind to attack him. He gently closed his eyes, as if he wanted to empathize with Yale's anger. This subordinate angered the Master of the Laws, and was sealed in the Divine Sense for 3 months. 3 months have long since passed, but even now, this subordinate's Divine Sense has yet to be unsealed. If this subordinate isn't wrong, This should be the work of the Master of the Laws. The Master of the Laws has never set foot in the divine palace of destruction. Some time ago, the King of the Laws was interested in going to the Shrine of Destruction. Although I didn't meet him, I believe that the King of the Laws has the ability to seal my deity ocean. Yale's eyes seemed to spit fire, but before long, he began to laugh self-deprecatingly. How laughable! I, Yale, have worked diligently for the god race for 100,000 years, but in the end all I get is suspicion. Your Majesty God Emperor, don't you feel that your chest hurts? Those people outside say that they've retreated from the room, but if nothing unexpected happens, they've already been waiting outside. They're probably just waiting outside. They're afraid that I'm plotting against you. As long as I show even the slightest hint of killing intent, they'll rush in from outside and execute me on the spot. High and mighty divine Emperor, could it be that you've forgotten the seal the King of Laws placed on my divine sea? This subordinate is just a mortal now. Even so, you still don't trust this subordinate. What should this subordinate say? After venting his emotions, Yale got up from the chair and looked at the pale-faced Emperor on the bed. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. He hung his head dejectedly, his eyes filled with confusion and distress, and tears lingered in his eyes. The expression on his face, whether it be his eyebrows, his eyes, his whole face, or his whole body, revealed an indescribable desolation. If you really suspect this subordinate, then please grant this subordinate death. In any case, it's better to die than to live now. Yale approached the God Emperor step by step. The God Emperor's eyes were filled with emotion. He was completely moved by Yale's emotions. For some reason, he didn't want to hide it from Yale, as if he had really hurt a loyal and devoted god race, the God King. His heart was in pain, and his mind kept organizing the words he wanted to say. I'm sorry. The divine Emperor abruptly uttered such a sentence. Outside the door, Angel King and Venerable of Lingbao were all stunned. Yale had vented his emotions fully just now. Even though they were not in the room, they could feel how desperate he was from the desolation in his words. Even so, this kind of despair could not be exchanged for the pity in their hearts. However, the divine Emperor was moved and even apologized to him. How was this possible? The divine Emperor was definitely not an indecisive person. Even if they really misunderstood Yale, it would be enough for them to compensate him after everything was over. What's more, he was a subject. He had no choice but to accept being wrongly accused. The Venerable of Lingbao and the others could not understand the divine Emperor's apology. Little did he know that when the divine Emperor responded with this apology, he himself was stunned for a long time. Why would he say such a thing? Yale's words were full of emotion and touching, making people feel pity for him. But he was the divine Emperor. If he had to apologize for such a trivial matter, how could he sit firmly in his position? The divine Emperor had to be ruthless. A bad feeling rose in the depths of the divine Emperor's heart. When he came to his senses, he found that Yale was less than half a meter away from him. I'm sorry. Do you think an apology can make up for the scar you left in my heart? Chapter 1905. Father, inside the secret realm, Song Ye's face was filled with panic. His lips trembled as he looked at Song En, who had just entered the secret realm. His entire body trembled violently, and his pupils contracted violently. He was completely speechless. Unbeknownst to him, Song En had also forgotten his original intention of entering the secret realm. He didn't reprimand Song Yi for his recklessness. Instead, he looked at the scene in front of him as if he had been frozen. Although the Song clan was a declining clan, Song En, as the clan leader, had seen many storms in his life, so much so that he could easily maintain a straight face when encountering certain things. At this moment, his steadiness couldn't stop his emotions from leaking out. The panic in his eyes could be clearly seen, and the fingers under his sleeves were also trembling slightly. How could this be? What appeared before Song Un and Song Yi was a broken wall. From this ruin, they could vaguely make out its former majestic appearance. However, this place was filled with traces of battle. The high-intensity battle had completely destroyed this place. Collapsed buildings and rubble were everywhere. The stone slabs on the ground were also shattered. Countless charred pits could still be felt, and the remnants of divine power could still be felt. Gurgling golden blood was still flowing through the cracks in the stone slabs. And the source of this golden blood was, that looks like the emotional divine king. Song Yi pointed at the person lying in a pool of blood as he spoke with a trembling voice. Song Un, who was standing in the distance, took a deep breath and slowly walked up to the person lying in the pool of blood. When he saw the true face of the deceased, Song An's heart skipped a beat. This was indeed the emotional divine king. The emotional divine king, who had entered the secret realm with the divine king of destruction not long ago, was lying in a pool of blood with his eyes wide open. Even now, one could see the anger and unwillingness in his eyes before his death. His left arm had also disappeared. The countless holes on his body were like a sieve. However, what left Song Un and Song Yi speechless was, "Father, this, the emotional divine king's godhead, has been dug out, right?" Song Yi, who was following behind Song Un, pointed at the emotional divine king's forehead and asked cautiously. He didn't even dare to look at the emotional divine king's eyes. Because even though the emotional divine king was already dead, those furious eyes were still accompanied by a terrifying pressure. Trembling sense of oppression. Looking ahead, less than 50 meters away, the demon emperor of the Second Era, who was also the first person to look for the godly king of destruction, had also died a tragic death. His finger gently touched the blood beside him. He seemed to have died a little later than the emotional god king. There were many scars on his body. If Song Un was not wrong, these scars should have been left behind by the emotional god king's personal artifact. Not too far away from the demon emperor, there was a jade bottle filled with pills. There were also a few pills scattered around it. Father, it was done by the god king of destruction. He must have colluded with the demon emperor of the Second Era to murder the god king emotion. Then, the god king of destruction killed the demon emperor of the Second Era. Song Yi shouted in horror. "Shut up!" Song Un roared. "Father, the god king of destruction is plotting a rebellion. He's trying to shake the foundation of the celestial race. We have to quickly inform His Majesty." As he spoke, Song Yi frantically tried to leave the secret realm. He didn't walk more than 10 meters before Song Un grabbed him back. "You are not allowed to go!" "Father, God King of Destruction, shut up!" A ruthless slap landed on Song Ye's face. Song Un pointed at the demon emperor and the emotional god king lying on the ground with bloodshot eyes. It was the demon emperor who murdered the emotional god king. His Majesty the God King of Destruction coincidentally discovered the murder of the emotional God King. He killed the demon emperor who was about to consume pills to heal his injuries. "Father, what are you saying? The God King of Destruction, Don't say any more. Just remember what I said. It was the demon emperor who murdered the emotional God King. His Majesty the God King of Destruction is the one who killed this traitor." Suddenly, Song Yi no longer argued. Even though he was still very young, he grew up in a large clan. His understanding of certain matters was far deeper than that of a child from an ordinary family. He understood the meaning behind Song An's words. It wasn't that Song An couldn't guess it. How could he not? The God King of Destruction and the emotional God King entered the secret realm at the same time. They never left the secret realm. The emotional God King died first and the demon emperor died later. One only needed to think about it to understand the relationship between the three. Even so, Song An still had to brace himself and say this. "Our Song clan has no way out?" Song Yi asked softly. Song Un, who was standing in front of the emotional God King's corpse, nodded silently. Their Song clan indeed had no way out? If the higher-ups really wanted to investigate the cause of the emotional God King's death, they would definitely find out that it was Song-un who brought the emotional God King into the secret realm. Just this alone was enough for the God Emperor to conclude that Song-un and the God King of Destruction were accomplices. If that was really the case, then so be it. Song-un was willing to sacrifice himself for the clan. But just now, he gave the Song clan's patriarch's golden seal to Yale. Originally, it was to make Yale believe that the Song clan was loyal to him. But, even in his dreams, he would never have imagined that he was the one who pushed the Song clan into the abyss. At this point, the Song clan could no longer stay out of trouble no matter what. Thus, the only way for their clan to obtain redemption was to walk the path to the end. Father, I might be too young to understand what you guys are thinking. Perhaps you think that walking the path to the end is the only way for us. But I feel that if we take the initiative to admit our mistakes and confess to the God Emperor, we will be able to destroy the God King of Destruction's vile actions. If it is made public, the Song family may not necessarily be destroyed. Didn't you teach me since I was young to take the initiative to admit my mistakes when I do something wrong? If I admit my mistakes in time, at most I will be scolded. But if I don't admit my mistakes, then the problem will be serious. Song Yi bit his lips, his clear eyes filled with struggle and distress. At most, our Song clan will bear the infamy for a period of time. But it's still better than sending our entire clan to the grave. The God King of Destruction is plotting a rebellion. He wants to become the enemy of the entire God clan and usurp the God Emperor's position. Father, if it's a rebellion, then our Song clan will take it. What rebellion against the God King of Destruction, huh? Seeing his eldest son's worried face, Song-an's heart didn't feel good. Sure enough, there was no such thing as a free lunch in the world. Their Song clan was a declining clan, so why would they receive the God King of Destruction's favor? Yale could clearly use the Qin clan, and he had many chief gods under him. Song-un, who was doing everything for the Song clan, had never thought about these things. He had wholeheartedly worked for Yale, sinking himself deeper and deeper. Until now, he was completely unable to extricate himself. If the Song clan was really exterminated, it would be Song-un burying the Song clan's foundation. Chapter 1906. Outside the Divine Emperor's bedroom, the King of Angels and several experts of the era had been waiting for an hour. After Yale poured out his heart in tears, the Divine Emperor's apology made them pay more attention to the situation in the room. Unexpectedly, they didn't hear any more conversation from outside the room. They could accept this kind of silence for a short time, but it was inevitable that they would get worried after a long time. Something's wrong. The Venerable of Numinous Treasure frowned and whispered. No matter what, the Divine Emperor and Yale had been silent for too long. Even if the Emperor felt sorry for Yale's words and didn't know what to say, Yale, who was in the middle of pouring out his heart, would definitely not continue to be silent like the Emperor when his emotions had reached the peak. If he wanted the Divine Emperor to blame himself, he would continue to question him. Something's wrong. This room is too quiet, Old Master Gu Shan said with a serious look in his eyes. Old Master Gu Shan also said with a solemn expression, but if there's no movement, it means that there's no fighting inside, right? As soon as he said that, several experts of the era looked at the King of Angels. The silence in the room made them uneasy. If this were the era, the Venerable of Numinous Treasure would have rushed into the room without hesitation. No matter what the situation inside was, even if his worry was unnecessary, he would at most express his apology. However, it would also ensure the safety of the situation inside. But this was the extraterritorial clan, not their territory. With the King of Angels in the Divine Palace, it was up to the King of Angels to decide whether to enter or not. Little did they know that the King of Angels was also very anxious at this time. He cared about the Divine Emperor's safety very much. With such a long silence enveloping the room, he also felt that the situation here was very strange. He didn't enter the room immediately because of the Divine Emperor's voice transmission before he left. "Wait for my message outside the door. If there's an accident, I'll send you a voice transmission immediately. If there's no voice transmission, no matter what happens in the room, don't come in." The King of Angels had been waiting for the Divine Emperor's voice transmission, but until now, he hadn't received any signal. This meant that the Divine Emperor was still safe. Perhaps that was the case. The King of Angels didn't have much confidence, but since the Divine Emperor had warned him in advance, he chose to believe in the Divine Emperor's judgment. Wait a little longer. Just like that, they continued to wait outside the room for about 10 minutes. There was still no sound coming from the room, causing the expressions of the people outside to change again and again. The anxious Angel King paced back and forth outside the room. He was still waiting for the Emperor's signal. "We can't wait any longer. No matter what the situation inside is, we need to go in and take a look. If something really happens, the God Emperor of your God race will be gone. At that time, our era will also suffer." With that, the Venerable of Lingbao did not wait for the Angel King's reply. He pushed the door open with both hands, and the others followed him into the room. What he had imagined did not happen. Instead, Yale, the god of destruction, sat in his chair in silence. When the Venerable of Lingbao and the others entered the room, Yale glanced at them. Not long after, he withdrew his gaze and sat in silence. At this time, the Divine Emperor of the Shen clan also left his bed and sat by the window, looking out with his back facing them. "Do you see that, Divine Emperor? What else do you have to say? Do you still want to deny that they can't hear our conversation? It's only been an hour, and they can't hold it in anymore, afraid that I'll do something to you." Yale grinned and laughed heartily, his words filled with sorrow. "How sad! To think that I, the great God King of Destruction, have worked hard for the God race for 100,000 years. Really." By the window, the Divine Emperor remained silent. After seeing the situation in the room, everyone knew that what they had imagined did not happen. Their breaking in just happened to fall into Yale's trap, becoming an excuse to slander the Divine Emperor. However, they could at least be assured of the Divine Emperor's safety. "Your Majesty, we'll leave right away." The Angel King cupped his hands and retreated. The Venerable of Lingbao also laughed heartily. "Apologies for delaying you, Divine Emperor. We'll leave right away." Yale's eyes were full of mockery. During this time, the Venerable of Lingbao even exchanged a fierce glare with him before turning around to leave. "Wait." Just then, Bai Haoyu suddenly extended a hand to stop them from leaving. The Angel King and the others watched as he walked up to the bed and bowed deeply to the Divine Emperor's back. "Your Majesty, perhaps our actions are contrary to your wishes and have displeased you, but you should at least give us a response. You can ignore us, Angel King, but we are people of the new era. We came here under the orders of the Star Lord. If we're considered guests, surely you wouldn't treat us like your subordinates, would you?" The Divine Emperor remained silent. The Angel King stepped forward, but the Venerable of Lingbao slapped him on the shoulder. "What do you think you're doing?" The Venerable of Lingbao sneered. The moment Bai Haoyu spoke, he thought of a possibility. Grabbing the Angel King by the shoulder, Bai Haoyu looked at the Divine Emperor's back with a solemn expression. A silver longsword suddenly appeared in his hand, and he leaped onto the Divine Emperor's back. "Your Majesty, stop right there!" the Angel King roared. He shook off the Venerable of Lingbao's hand, but Bai Haoyu's hand was already on the Divine Emperor's shoulder. With a gentle pull, the Divine Emperor, who was sitting in front of the window, fell backward. As the Divine Emperor was about to hit the ground, Bai Haoyu's eyes widened when he saw the Divine Emperor's face. "Stop him!" he shouted. Almost at the same time, Gu Shan and the Venerable of Lingbao moved to Yale's left and right. The Angel King, who had wanted to stop Bai Haoyu, froze. He stared blankly at the divine emperor's face, then at the bloody hole between his eyebrows. "You want to stop me with just the likes of you?" "No, you can't stop me." Yale laughed wildly. His divine power surged like a wild beast as he roared at the venerable of Lingbao and the others. At the same time, everyone saw him open his right hand, and there was a bloody godhead in his palm. From the appearance of the godhead, they could vaguely tell that it was the godhead of a divine emperor. All of a sudden, a pitch-black vortex appeared in Yale's right palm. The vortex swallowed the divine spark, and before long, it appeared on the back of his hand. "Yale, how dare you usurp the throne?" "What do you mean by dare?" "Before I succeeded, I usurped the throne. Now that I succeeded, I replaced you. From now on, I'm the divine emperor of the divine race. You people." Chapter 1907. "Oh my God, look at the divine palace!" Countless gods of the outer realms stopped and looked at the sky above the divine palace. The thick, dark clouds were so oppressive that they almost couldn't breathe. The divine palace was shrouded in darkness for tens of thousands of miles. The outer realm gods who saw this all felt as if a huge rock was pressing on their chest. They couldn't help but tremble from the depths of their souls. A bolt of lightning that looked like a blue dragon landed on the top floor of the divine palace. In an instant, the entire building was covered in lightning. The lightning energy climbed up the surface and leaked outward. Around the divine palace, a monstrous gale raged around the divine palace. Around him, the angel clansmen outside were all on the verge of collapse. This kind of heaven and earth anomaly was also very rare in the Outerium god race. Such a situation had happened 3 times in the outer realm. The first time was when the darkness divine king broke through. The second time was when the outer realm divine king was at the most critical moment of the outer realm. The outer realm had invaded the hinterlands of the outer realm, and the divine emperor was furious. In the sky, this was the 3rd time the outer realm gods had seen it. Such a phenomenon didn't just attract the attention of the gods. The main god experts of the outer realm, and even some old faces that they hadn't seen for a long time, broke out of their seclusion and looked in the direction of the divine palace. Their senses were much sharper than the gods. From this heavy atmosphere, they could smell the scent of disaster. Everyone's eyes were focused on the situation at the divine palace. At that moment, they felt a terrifying pressure emanating from the divine palace. The gods hurriedly retreated, not daring to fight against it. Boom! Suddenly, a loud noise resounded throughout the outer realm. As the onlookers watched, the building of the divine palace exploded with a loud bang. The top floor of the building was blown up. Countless pieces of rubble fell in all directions. Then, everyone saw that in the darkness, several beams of light shot up into the sky. Who is so bold to act so violently in the divine palace? Some gods were shocked. In the outer realm, the divine palace was a building of faith. The divine palace, which was guarded by a divine emperor, was the nightmare of countless planes. Anyone who dared to act recklessly around the divine palace would not have a good ending. In the eyes of the gods of the god race, anyone who dared to destroy the god palace was simply courting death. He must be tired of living, running to the divine palace to be presumptuous. The divine emperor has been guarding the divine palace recently. It looks like that person is not far from death. No wonder there is such a strange phenomenon. That person must have provoked the divine emperor, causing the divine emperor to become angry. The true gods chuckled with different words. Most of their eyes were filled with mockery and mockery. This was understandable. The majestic image of the divine emperor had been established in their hearts for more than millions of years. The countless supreme experts of the planes gave them this kind of confidence. Some of the true gods couldn't be bothered to watch the show anymore. They either went back to their work or continued to cultivate. Wait, those people. At this moment, a member of the Outerium god race with better eyesight suddenly stretched out his hand and pointed towards the void. The other gods all looked towards him in confusion. It was also these overgods and the older overgods who frowned. They saw the identity of the people under those rays of light. What happened to those people? The more impatient ones had already asked. Then, they heard the true God's voice filled with disbelief. Those people seemed to be the experts sent by the Angel King and Yuan. The person they are chasing seems to be Destruction God King Yale. Under the thick, pitch-black clouds, Yale stopped in a place where lightning and thunder intersected. The Angel King's eyes were filled with unconcealable anger. His burning eyes were like two balls of scorching flames that wanted to burn the world and Yale to ashes. Although the Yuan's experts weren't as angry as him, their gazes were solemn and they were ready for battle. Yale's lips curled into a smile. His surging aura seemed uncontrollable, constantly surging out from his body. His expression was relaxed, and his eyes were mixed with faint disdain. However, if one looked at the top of his head, there were no less than 4 godhoods hovering above his head. 3 of the godheads shone brightly, but the one in the center was dim and lifeless. That godhood was the one Elder Lin had sealed. Elder Lin's seal hadn't been wrong. Even now, his godhood hadn't been unsealed. As for the other godhoods, they came from the Second Era's origin demon monarch, Emotion God King Orbis, and the God King. Only now did the venerables of numinous treasures understand why the God King would apologize to Yale. During their conversation, Yale must have used the Emotion Godhood's power to make the God King lower his psychological defenses against him. That was also why the God King was killed without any resistance. The Angel Monarch blamed himself for this. He didn't notice the emotional power in the Divine Palace, and he delayed entering the room. If he could ignore the God King might not have had his godhood dug out. But what they found even more unbelievable was how Yale could fuse 4 godhoods into his body. It should be noted that the power contained within each godhood was very strong. The second divine concentration was only a legend among the god race. Joy God King's second divine concentration was built on the fact that one of his godhoods was broken. There were no less than 4 godhoods. Putting aside the fact that Yale could use them, just the energy contained within them was enough to make his body explode. How about it? I've chosen a good burial ground for you all. In the end, Yale's godhood didn't explode, and he was still alive and well. He smiled contentedly at the Angel King, the venerable of numinous treasures, and the others in front of him. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he glanced at the surrounding god. Not bad. With so many people watching, I'll show them my power. I'll let them see with their own eyes how powerful the new God King they're about to serve is. Rebel against your master. Die. Almost in an instant, the Angel King, whose body was burning with holy light, crashed towards Yale like a comet. He no longer cared about life or death. Before he made his move, he ignited his holy light. Without holding back, he unleashed 200% of his power. This usurper had to die, and he, the Angel King, didn't expect to come back alive. Your Majesty! The angel clansmen around the Divine Palace were all shocked. Outsiders might not know what this burning holy light represented, but they, the angel clansmen, were very clear. They could only watch as a holy ball of flame transformed into a dazzling arc that almost turned the world into day. The Angel King, who had risked his life to exchange for the God Kings, stared at Yale in front of him. Heh! You probably don't know what absolute power is, the Angel King said coldly. Heh! You might not know what absolute power is. Chapter 1908. The angel clansmen around the Divine Palace would never be able to forget this scene. The Angel King, who was burning with holy light, used his life to launch a fatal blow. The holy light that lit up the divine race's continent was annihilated by Yale's flick of a finger. It was just a gentle flick of a finger, but the Angel King, who was determined to die, fell like an angel with broken wings. The God King of Destruction wants to usurp the throne and rebel. Someone shouted angrily in the sky. Immediately, a large number of experts from the divine race surrounded Yale. Some of them were almighties above the Lord realm who had retired long ago. Everyone was furious. They could clearly see that the Godhead belonging to the God King was now in Yale's possession. Everyone had the right to kill such a rebellious person. The God's encirclement of Yale bought Angel King a lot of time. The 2 8-winged angels hurriedly caught him and kept injecting their holy power into his body. They also kept throwing pills into his mouth as if they were free. "Don't waste your energy." The Angel King with a small hole between his eyebrows smiled. Above his head was a broken and dim diamond-shaped Godhead. God power continuously flowed out of the Godhead. The Angel King's face grew paler. No one in the divine race can resist Yale who has fused with 4 Godheads. Right now, he's not at his peak. Once he breaks through the seal of his Godhead, it will be hard for anyone in this world to be his enemy. Your Majesty, don't interrupt me. Listen to me. The Angel King grabbed the old woman's arm and said, "Go find the Epic Star Lord and bring the angels. Don't care about my life or death." The God King once said that the Epic Star Lord is special. I believe him because he's the only person in the past billions of years who could grow 12 wings. 10. 12 wings. Yes, 12 wings. As long as Yale wanted to, he would be able to kill those people who had surrounded him in an instant. Perhaps what I'm saying now is unfair to them. Although they'll die for a reason. Without buying time for them, we'll all die. With that, we'll all die. As soon as he finished speaking, the Angel King grabbed his Godhead and yanked it hard. This tug seemed to sever the connection between him and the Godhead. "Take this godhood with you. Give it to our clan or to a fated person in this era." "Your Majesty!" "Take it. Do you want this king's divine spark to be taken away by that filthy fellow?" The Angel King shouted angrily with all his might, but the 2 8-winged angels didn't take it. Just then, the Venerable of Lingbao reached out his hand and grabbed the godhood. "We will avenge you." The Venerable of Numinous Treasure gritted his teeth and put away the Godhead. With a wave of his arm, he grabbed the 2 8-winged angels and left with the rest of the angels in front of the divine palace. The Angel King, who was lying on the ground, looked up at the dark clouds in the sky with gratitude in his eyes. Just like that, he laughed until the end of his life. "Yale, you plotted to murder the divine emperor and heavily injured the Angel King. Your crimes are unforgivable, you." All of a sudden, the old man's words came to an abrupt halt. By the time everyone came back to their senses, the old man's forehead had been pierced. Before the Godhead in his body could be summoned, it had already shattered into pieces. The old man's soul had also dispersed along with it. Gulp. Many people gulped as cold sweat dripped down their back. What kind of divine might was this? Many of the gods present recognized the old man who had gone into seclusion. He could be considered the oldest among the over-god. Due to his age, he no longer bothered himself with the affairs of the god race and went into seclusion. However, his realm was solid. He was much stronger than most of the over-gods. He was killed in an instant. He didn't even have a chance to resist. Could they really take down this traitor? "Yale, do you know who you killed? He was once." "Shut up, you scum." With Yale's shout, the middle-aged man who spoke up for the old man was cut into countless pieces. Golden blood sprayed into the sky. Actually, many people knew what the young man wanted to say. The old man Yale had just killed was one of Yale's teachers when he was young. The young man could be considered half a senior brother to him. Stabilizing your realm has become a difficult task. Your cultivation is already showing signs of regressing. You should have been buried a long time ago. I really don't know what you're persisting for. You're wasting the few resources of the god race. You've lived for hundreds of thousands of years, but you haven't even reached the over-god level. You think you deserve to talk to me? Yale, who had done all of this, didn't feel any remorse. He spat and twisted his neck. The god race that I rule doesn't need scum who waste resources. At this moment, the sounds of intense fighting suddenly came from behind the gods. Not long after, everyone turned their heads and saw the mighty army charging in from the periphery. These people seemed to have lost their minds, and no one who was near them could survive. The chaotic battle had begun. Countless gods waved their weapons in the sky. They didn't show any mercy. They only had one thought in their minds: to kill the enemies in front of them. Their former compatriots were killing each other, but Yale watched the scene with satisfaction. Your subordinate came late to the rescue. Please punish me, Your Majesty. The one kneeling in front of Yale was Song-an of the Song clan. As for those who were fighting the gods, they were also members of the Song clan. Just as Song-an said, they had no way out at this point. The Song clan also made up their minds and bet the rise and fall of the entire clan on this battle. You're not late. You're already very fast. At least compared to my former subordinates. Greetings, Your Majesty. Suddenly, a few more people appeared in front of Yale. Every single one of them was once a sovereign under Yale's command. When they learned that Yale had usurped the throne, they had hesitated. But now, with the God Emperor's fate unknown and the Angel King dead, Yale had gained the absolute advantage. A wise man submits to the circumstances. If they made an enemy of Yale now, they would be making an enemy of the God race's royal power. They would be making an enemy of the entire world. The few of you didn't waste this emperor's efforts on you. At the same time, Yale also noticed the venerable of numinous treasure and the others fleeing, but he didn't take it to heart. Even if these people escaped, could they escape Yale's palm? What he needed to do now was to announce to the entire God race: the former God Emperor had fallen. The God race's regime would be rewritten. Chapter 1909. The mysteries of the universe's secret realms were a mystery to countless galaxies. Some major powers had once mentioned that the universe's secret realms might be the resting place of a mysterious race. That was because there were always buildings at the edges and center of the secret realms. Just like the many galaxies in the universe, the central secret realm was the most flourishing city. It was also the location with the highest chance of unearthing supreme treasures. The edges of the secret realms were like subsidiary cities or small, undeveloped cities. Countless Star Lords had once explored the deeper secrets of the universe's secret realms, but in the end they all returned empty-handed. In the end, the current universe's secret realms had simply become a way to obtain supreme treasures. You're all here. Yang Jian hid behind a stone pillar in front of a majestic palace and greeted Yi Zichen and the others. All living things had desires. After they'd thoroughly investigated the area around the secret realm's entrance and confirmed that there were no signs of treasures, even though they knew that exploring the outside world was likely to lead to unknown dangers, they still resolutely chose to explore. Opportunity always coexisted with danger. After witnessing the Soul Gem's abilities, how could they not look forward to other treasures? What's more, it was only a supreme treasure. If they could get their hands on a supreme treasure, then even if a race from outside the universe appeared, they would still be able to put up a fight. This wasn't just to satisfy their own desires, but also for the future of the Milky Way galaxy. Treasures have been unearthed here? The speaker didn't say anything else. He got straight to the point. Yang Jian squinted at him, his expression unsightly. The speaker wasn't someone from the First Era, but a god of the God race. Although the God race had allied with the First Era, the rift between them wasn't something that could be erased with just a few words. Yi Zichen and the God Emperor were the commanders of both sides. Yi Zichen and the God Emperor, the commanders of both sides, could shake hands and make peace, but their subordinates might not be as magnanimous as them. What's up with this bunch of unimportant people? Don't look at me, said the great sage with a shrug. The great sage waved his hand and shrugged. I, old son, didn't look for them. Who knows where they got the news from? They just followed me. There were quite a lot of people from the outer world god race. There were a total of 7 over-god realm experts. Only one of them was an expert from the Qin clan who was on relatively good terms with Ji Yuan. The other 6 were all overgods under the command of the God King of the Outlands. 2 of them had joined Yi Zichen out of respect for Elder Lin and the War Goddess. He was the one who had just been released. Seeing these people makes my mood terrible. Yang Jian openly revealed his displeasure towards the foreign experts of the god race. The foreign overgods all frowned. They wanted to say something, but they swallowed the words that were at the tip of their tongues. The purpose of coming here was to obtain treasures. Now that the clue to the treasure was in Yang Jian's hands, it was better for them to endure until they got the clue. He's really enduring humiliation for the greater good. Yang Jian glanced at the surrounding outer realm celestial race experts. He could tell what they were thinking with a single glance. Wanting to know more about the treasure? Dream on. If they wanted to come, then so be it. It was good to have a few free fighters. In the end, the treasure would still fall into Ji Yuan's hands. Everyone's here, right? If they're all here, let's head out. And Gu Xuanda was just about to say that there were still people who hadn't arrived when he heard a whisper. Let's go. Yi Zichen and Elder Lin told me to go with you. The War Goddess. No one had noticed when the War Goddess had arrived. Not even the overgods had sensed her arrival. Their divine senses were clearly on high alert, but the War Goddess had still managed to sneak up on them without a sound. Quite a few of the overgods' expressions grew solemn. It seemed that the number 1 overgod of the god race was far stronger than they'd imagined. Yi Zichen isn't coming? Yang Jian's first choice to lead the group was naturally Yi Zichen, the Lord of Stars. He couldn't help but feel a bit regretful that he hadn't come, but he could accept having the War Goddess with him. No matter how you looked at it, the War Goddess was rather friendly with their era. Of course. He said he wasn't too clear about how the treasures were classified, and that someone had to stand guard at the entrance to the secret realm. He asked me to go with you. If a great treasure or supreme treasure appears, send someone to notify them, and they'll rush over immediately. Reinforcements, said the War Goddess. This arrangement seemed to fit Yi Zichen's style. The Era Lords nodded slightly, then heard the War Goddess continue. The treasures you speak of are inside this palace, right? The few Protoss experts at the side immediately restrained their thoughts and concentrated, afraid of missing a word. T-Sich. Yi Zichen glared at them unkindly. Do I really have to say it here? Of course, said the War Goddess. If we don't explain things clearly in advance, we'll get into a lot of unnecessary trouble. As for anything else, you don't need to worry. With me here, no one can do anything rash in front of me. The great sage, Gu Xuanda, and the others nodded subtly at Yang Jian, then thought back to the War Goddess's earlier attitude. All right, then I'll explain it to you in detail. With that, Yang Jian retracted his gaze. His hand swept across the air gently, and a scroll drawn with divine power appeared in front of everyone. This is the structure of the palace's interior. The scroll was very well drawn. It was clear where the passageways were and where the dead ends were. The people in front of them were not mediocre. Even though it was just a map, they were still able to construct a three-dimensional model in their mind. In just a few short seconds, they had a rough idea of the internal structure of the palace. After the monkey left, I did a simple check of the interior of the palace. I can confirm that we are not allowed to enter these places. As he spoke, a few more eye-catching red dots appeared on the scroll. You said so much, but where exactly are the treasures? You just need to know the dangerous places. We'll just follow you. It would be great if that was the case. Yang Jian looked meaningfully at him and snorted. Yang Jian gave him a meaningful look and snorted. I'm telling you all this because I'm afraid you'll be in trouble. Then, you'll accuse us of tricking you. You want to know where the treasures are, right? The treasures are right in the center of the palace. Suddenly, a symbol that looked like a treasure chest appeared on the scroll. This is a sacrificial altar, a treasure that was unearthed. The monkey and I discovered it here. The eyes of the few overgods of the god race lit up instantly. Anyone could sense the greed in their hearts from the scorching light in their eyes. Chapter 1910. With the route map that Yang Jian had obtained in advance, the extraterrestrial Protoss experts and the experts from the new era who had entered the palace were not particularly unfamiliar with the palace. What was worth mentioning was that the god race's chief gods were indescribably obedient when they entered the hall. Knowing that there were races from other galaxies in the palace, no matter how passionate they were about the unearthed treasures, there was no way they could rush over to snatch the treasures. No matter what, the outer races of the universe were mysterious to them. In the midst of this, some people also wondered if Yang Jian had done this on purpose. He wanted to use this method to make them doubt him. However, Yang Jian did not deliberately stare at them along the way, which made them even more afraid. War Goddess, didn't you say that we would be safe here for at least 1,000 years? Just now, the people from the previous era said that there were outsiders here. This is contrary to what you said. The master god of the outer realm Protoss race questioned her, but the war goddess merely glanced at him indifferently. Can you be more obedient? Yang Jian's spiritual consciousness fused with it as he berated. Do you think that just because it's a spiritual sense communication, it wouldn't be detected? You've had dealings with other races in the universe? If anything happens to any of us here, you'll be the first one I leave behind. Use it as a meat shield. Being reprimanded in such a manner, that god race expert's expression naturally didn't look too good. However, none of the other overgods stood by his side to speak up for him. This was all because Yang Jian's words were what they wanted to say as well. None of them had any dealings with beings from other races in the universe. They thought that the safest way to communicate was to communicate telepathically. They would definitely be discovered by the other party and fall into a dangerous situation. Moreover, the war goddess was no longer a main god under Yale of the outer realm gods. From the moment she arrived at the universe mystic realm, based on her understanding of the universe mystic realm and the King of Law's attitude towards her, their positions were no longer equal. The people who came here might have different reasons. For example, Qing Feng from the Qing clan. His thirst for knowledge was comparatively stronger, so coming here to seize treasures was secondary. He wanted to see the entire process of the treasure being unearthed. However, he was an anomaly in the end. Tracing back to the source, their goal was to seek treasures. If he could obtain a few treasures to enrich his own strength, he could increase the overall strength of an era or the outer realm god race. To achieve this goal, they could not tolerate any mistakes. If it weren't for the fact that they were colleagues, the other sovereigns would have long since reprimanded him for his actions. Actually, I don't want to answer your question. At this moment, the war goddess looked at the Lord God who was being scolded and shook her head. But seeing that you're unwilling, I'm afraid that you'll hold a grudge against us when the time comes, so I'll explain it to you, even though your question is idiotic. Back then, the 1,000 years I mentioned was a conservative estimate. I can't rule out the possibility that other outer mystic realms might be lucky enough to enter the center. Another point is that before we entered, the Green Rain race had already entered this place. This means that the universe secret realm had appeared a long time ago. He was just discovered. No one knew how long this place had existed before the God Emperor discovered it. In other words, the universe secret realm might have appeared for more than 1,000 years. The goddess of war sighed as she looked at the Lord God coldly. I'm sure you'll understand if I put it this way. I hope you'll know your place and rein in the greed in your heart. Without a life to live, no matter how big your ambition is, it's useless. The atmosphere in the corridor was indescribably heavy, and the Lord was rendered speechless for a long time. The others noticed that the atmosphere was not quite right, so they wanted to change the topic. In the end, it was Gu Xuanda who chuckled. Don't think about it so badly. Maybe what Brother Yang saw wasn't a foreign race, but a race from another plane in the Milky Way. Our epoch doesn't have a deep understanding of the other planes. When we see someone who isn't a human, demon, we think it's an outsider. I saw it before. Didn't the Green Rain clan give us quite a fright as well? That's a possibility. The war goddess nodded with a cold expression. It's just that some people only have the realm but don't have the brains. It's clearly a very simple question, but they feel like they're the best in the world. This self-righteous attitude, in this I am afraid they won't live long in this chaotic world. War goddess, don't go too far. Don't think that with Yale. Suddenly, an afterimage flashed past everyone's eyes. When everyone came back to their senses, they saw that the war goddess, who was more than 10 meters away from the Lord, had already appeared in front of him. Her finger gently touched the space between the Lord's eyebrows. If you say another word, you'll be left here. Do you believe me? A drop of cold sweat slowly slid down the Lord God's forehead. The other Lord Gods looked at the war goddess who had appeared there in astonishment. How was this possible? In less than a month, how could the war goddess's realm have improved to such a level? There was only one possibility. That was, the war goddess had been suppressing her strength when she worked under Yale. Which god palace's lord is this? My colleague, please come and identify him. Tell him not to annoy me anymore. Actually, my temper has always been bad. Looking at the Lord's panicked eyes, the war goddess removed her finger from the space between his eyebrows. Not long after, a lord with a full beard walked out of the crowd and came to his side. He grabbed the Lord's arm and dragged him to the back of the line. The war goddess's strength was also deeply imprinted in everyone's hearts. According to Brother Yang Jian's map, we should be in the realm of the foreign races in the universe. While everyone was immersed in the goddess of war's domineering attitude, Green Maple, who was like a clear stream, curiously ended the depressing atmosphere. The others also took this opportunity to change the topic. Yang Jian, who was also stunned, also came back to his senses. The map was laid out in front of everyone's eyes. Yes, it's about here. The foreign races have a wide range of alert. We're already at the edge of their alert range. Forward, everyone, come here. Before Yang Jian could finish, the war goddess had already walked to an empty room and sent a telepathic message to everyone. Without hesitation, everyone followed her into the room. Immediately, they saw the war goddess's finger lightly moving. In less than half a minute, everyone saw a creature with 6 arms that was as tall as a human appear in the hallway. For a moment, everyone held their breaths. The 6-armed man simply looked around a few times before turning back the way he came. I have terrible news to tell you. Not long after he left, the war goddess looked at everyone with a serious expression. This is indeed a foreign race creature in the universe. Chapter 1911. To the crowd, this was absolutely terrible news. The Central Secret Realm had been explored by the Cursed Universe's alien races. Their people had also entered and discovered treasures. They were still wondering if it was another race in the Milky Way, but the war goddess's words were like bubbles. Inside the silent room, actually, they could only say that they were lucky to be visited by the Protoss race. Although this was a room, there were only a few walls. There were no windows in the room. From the moss on the walls, one could tell how long this place had been left behind. Fortunately, the alien race's people did not move forward to guard. If they had moved forward a few dozen meters, they might have been exposed to the alien races. Are they really from the alien races? I'm sure. From the goddess of war's gaze, everyone could feel that there was something different in her eyes. They were all Protoss lords from the Protoss race. Ever since coming to the universe secret realm, the war goddess seemed to have changed into a different person. It was as if she had personally experienced everything here. This is a little troublesome. Gu Xuanda also frowned. As long as the alien races appeared in the Central Secret Realm, they would definitely send their people back to deploy experts. In other words, more and more alien races would enter this place in the future. Moreover, this place was not too far from the entrance of the Central Secret Realm. If they continued to explore, they would definitely find the entrance of the secret realm. When that happened, it would be a disaster for the Milky Way galaxy. How did they get here so quickly? The other people in the group also frowned. Some of them clenched their fists and sighed. Maybe we're too late. Without exception, the many experts from the Protoss race all had bitter looks on their faces. It was as if the end of the world was coming. They hung their heads and sat on the ground, paralyzed. They did not communicate with each other at all. They did not discuss how to deal with the predicament they were about to face. It was as if they were already prepared to resign themselves to death and wait for the alien race to capture them. Yang Jian pouted at the great sage. "Monkey, don't you think those guys look a little like the people we know?" Yang Jian gestured at the great sage with his lips. "You mean Neza?" The great sage said without hesitation. The alien race's 6 arms were like Neza's ability. However, that guy was too dark, and Neza was much fairer than him. Furthermore, Neza was so cute. For Yang Jian to be able to associate Neza with that alien race in the universe, his brain circuit was really something. "Neza's 3 heads and 6 arms is a divine ability," said the great sage. "I know. I didn't say it was Neza." Yang Jian rolled his eyes at him and said, "I'm just saying. But the alien's 6 arms, could it be related to Neza's god art?" The great sage was speechless. According to what Yang Jian had said, the secret techniques of the Heavenly Palace were related to the outer races of the universe. "Yang Jian, you should have a way to avoid these spies and unearth the treasure, right?" At that moment, the war goddess interrupted the conversation between Yang Jian and the great sage. "Of course," Yang Jian said with a smug smile. "This is a secret passage that I discovered by chance. You can go through this secret passage to a spot dozens of meters away from the treasure. It's just that the security there is much tighter than here. If too many people go, I'm afraid you're coming with me." The war goddess looked a little anxious. After discovering the identity of the alien race, the war goddess could no longer remain as calm as before. She knew better than anyone here. The problem here was much more serious than they had imagined. She needed to quickly head to the location of the treasure and determine its grade. If it was a normal treasure, that would be fine. If it was just a normal treasure, they probably wouldn't be in a rush to dispatch their race's experts. But if it was a treasure above the level of a great treasure, then the situation would be difficult to handle. However, the war goddess's mood was not optimistic. For so many of her people to be on guard, and recalling Yang Jian's map, and for so many people to guard the center of the treasure, it would be hard for it not to be a great treasure. If Yang Jian and the war goddess were to go alone, many of the experts of the divine race would be unwilling. Their goal here was to steal the treasure. Not letting them go was equivalent to taking away their right to steal the treasure. But the war goddess's earlier display of strength was now in effect. These people remembered the scene clearly, so much so that they didn't dare to go against the war goddess's decision. "Just the 2 of us?" Yang Jian also realized that the experts of the divine race would definitely have a different opinion. He looked at them and noticed their expressions, and he couldn't help but smile. "All right, then the 2 of us will go." With that, Yang Jian looked outside the corridor a few times. After confirming that there were no outsiders outside, he spoke to the great sage. "Monkey, bring everyone out first. After the war goddess and I confirm the treasure, we will meet up with you. The place where we meet will be where I was just now." "No problem. Be careful." Yang Jian nodded confidently. Everyone watched as his hand suddenly passed through the wall of the corridor. It was only then that everyone realized that the secret passage was in this corridor. Along the way, the war goddess followed behind Yang Jian. As they passed through the passage, they could vaguely sense that there were creatures moving above. Yang Jian carefully walked forward until, "It's here," suddenly, Yang Jian stopped and waved his hand at the war goddess. Hearing this, the war goddess, who had rushed over, came to Yang Jian's side and noticed that there was a small hole here. It must have been made by Yang Jian, who had first discovered this passage. The small hole was facing the center of the palace. Through this small hole, they could clearly see that there were at least 2 digits of the divine race guarding the area. And in the center of their guard, gulp. In the quiet passage, there was the sound of someone swallowing saliva. This sound wasn't Yang Jian's, so naturally, looking over at the war goddess, he saw that her eyes were trembling uncontrollably. She was biting down so hard on her lips that a line appeared. This is bad. After a long time, the war goddess sighed deeply. Yang Jian looked at her, confused. Then, he heard the war goddess speak again. Chapter 1912. Ultimate Treasure. Yang Jian's eyes turned red when he heard the war goddess's appraisal of the treasure. Ultimate treasure. The soul gem was only a great treasure, but it was already able to unleash such power. Ultimate treasure was a level higher than great treasure. Didn't that mean, are you sure? Yang Jian, who didn't know that the ultimate treasure was a disaster for the Milky Way galaxy, looked at the war goddess with excitement. However, the excited Yang Jian was met with a long silence from the war goddess. That kind of silence gave people a suffocating pressure. Her heavy eyes were filled with worry for the future. After a while, the war goddess sighed and nodded. I'm sure. The most direct difference between a great treasure and an ultimate treasure was the light. Before it was unearthed, due to the unique geography of the universe's secret realm, the treasure couldn't be determined by its aura. Only light, both great treasures and ultimate treasures would emit a purplish-white light when they were unearthed. Those that emitted this light could be great treasures, but pure white light could only be ultimate treasures. Ultimate treasures unearthed. The outer races would definitely return to their races and send their elites to guard the entire process of the treasure being unearthed. In other words, those elites could be on their way, or Grand Priest. All of the 6-armed beings outside suddenly knelt to the ground. Not long after that, an elderly man who also had 6 arms and was dressed in a purplish-green robe appeared in front of them. We can understand what they're saying. Yang Jian raised his eyebrows in shock. He thought that the outer races would have their own language. The Milky Way galaxy used to be the center of the universe, and we learned the common language of the universe. They were speaking the common language of the universe, so naturally, we can understand them. The war goddess carefully explained. Let's not talk about this anymore. Let's go. Go? The ultimate treasure will be unearthed. Yang Jian didn't want to give up. Don't worry about it. If we don't go, who's there? Suddenly, the Grand Priest walked towards Yang Jian and the war goddess. With a shake of his arm, a dagger appeared in the palm of the war goddess's hand. Looks like we can't leave. At the entrance of the secret realm. As the owner of the soul gem, he needed to stay here in case of emergencies before the spirit formation that was set up using the soul gem as the formation core could mature and operate. It had been several days since the team that had gone to the palace to search for treasures had left. There was no reply. Yi Zichen couldn't help but worry. He gazed off into the distance. Perhaps he himself had forgotten how many times he had gazed into the depths of the secret realm. His gaze was deep and solemn. Don't worry. Elder Lin patted Yi Zichen's shoulder a few times. As if he could see Yi Zichen's anxiety, he smiled kindly and comforted him. They're all elites and the goddess is among them. If there is any danger, the war goddess will warn them in advance and evacuate them safely. When he heard that, Yi Zichen, who'd been gazing off into the distance, finally looked away. Turning around, he saw that Elder Lin had already placed the table and chairs that he had brought from his hometown in front of him. There was even a pot of steaming hot tea placed on top of the table. Master, try this green tip. It's something my kids brought back from other planes. It has the effect of calming the mind. Yi. Yi Saint Tea. Yi. Yi Yi Yi. Yi Yi Dragon Yi the tea was. Yi and Yi was Yi. The tea was warm, so he took a sip. The refreshing tea flowed down Yi Zichen's throat, transforming into a warm current that flowed slowly through his chest. Soon after, this strand of warmth flowed through his limbs and bones, completely calming the uneasiness in his heart. It really is good tea. Yi Zichen put down his cup and sighed in admiration. Elder Lin pursed his lips and chuckled. Of course, this tea was taken from a plane that had already been destroyed. What I have here is the last stock of this world. Even I don't dare to drink too much. A little bit is a little less. Destruction. Yi Zichen didn't know why, but lately, he seemed particularly sensitive to destruction. He barely heard Elder Lin's last words. The word destruction lingered in his mind. Why do you think there's always war? Yi Zichen said this from the bottom of his heart. He'd experienced far too many battles. The demon invasion, the great war between the heavenly palace and the demons. Now, the flames of war between the demons and gods, as well as the outside's desire to destroy the new era. Even in the modern realm, some countries were still embroiled in the flames of war, their people living in misery. It was as if war was the only way to rule the world. No world, no race, no country, no plane could coexist in harmony. The current secret realm. It was still the same. This. I don't know either. No matter what world you were in, war was unavoidable. At the end of the day, it was all about ambition. Every race had a desire to invade and enslave other races. When this desire reached its peak, the race's strength reached a certain level, and war was naturally imminent. Some wars were fought for self-preservation, while others were fought to invade. In short, it was inevitable. I don't know why, but I've been so flustered these past few days. All I can think about is this. Yi Zichen didn't get an answer from Elder Lin, so he just muttered to himself. Elder Lin simply patted him on the shoulder. I understand. You don't need to worry about the war goddess. I sent Lin Ru back to check on the outside and the new era. I'm sure you'll be at ease soon enough. Perhaps. Before Yi Zichen could finish his sentence, he saw two frantic figures rush towards them from both the entrance and the depths of the secret realm. Lin Ru, who'd gone to the outside and the new era, and Qing Feng, who'd gone into the depths of the palace. The instant he saw their expressions, Yi Zichen's heart sank. He'd been panicking the entire time. Grandpa! Yi Zichen! The King of the Laws! Star Lord Yi! The two of them called out to Elder Lin and Yi Zichen at practically the same time. What is it? Qing Feng, you go first. Elder Lin frowned. After calming them down, he looked at Qing Feng. A supreme treasure has appeared in the palace, and there are experts from the outside. The war goddess and the others are trapped around the palace and are currently fighting them. The situation is extremely urgent. Please. It's urgent here too. Right at this moment, Lin Ru directly interrupted Qing Feng. The God Emperor of the God race is dead. The God King of Destruction is the current God Emperor. He's currently massacring the other planes. The new era is one of them. Chapter 1913. The current situation had fallen into a situation where they could neither advance nor retreat. Yi Zichen couldn't help but sigh when he heard Qing Feng and Lin Ru's news. No wonder he'd felt so anxious earlier. He'd already prepared himself, but he still hadn't expected it to be so terrible. The situation. It was a hard choice to make. The outsiders had invaded the central secret realm. Yang Jian, the great sage, and the war goddess were all in a difficult situation and couldn't leave. More importantly, the invasion of other races meant that the central mystery realm was no longer safe. It was very likely that they would pass through. They might pass through the entrance of the secret realm and head towards the Milky Way. When that happened, the Milky Way would face a calamity. If that was the case, Yi Zichen and Elder Lin would head towards the palace without any hesitation. No matter how strong the outsiders were, they had to use their bodies to defend the entrance and fight for the Milky Way's survival. However, even without the outsiders' invasion, the Milky Way was still in danger. The God King of Destruction had become the God Emperor. Everyone in the world knew about this God King's ambition. His personality and actions were worthy of his title, Destruction. Destroying planes was what made him the happiest. What he loved to see the most was the scene of countless ethnic planes being destroyed. The decision was in Yi Zichen and Elder Lin's hands. It wasn't just Yi Zichen who felt troubled. Even Elder Lin found it hard to make a decision. He knew very well how strong the outsiders were. He was certain that they wouldn't be able to break free in a short period of time, much less punish them. Wasting a lot of time with them was the same as putting the Milky Way into dire straits. One had to know that their goal in coming to the universe's secret realm was to protect the Milky Way galaxy. If this caused the Milky Way galaxy to be destroyed by the God King of Destruction, even if they won the battle against the alien races, they would only be able to return to see the destroyed Milky Way galaxy. That would be putting the cart before the horse. If they went to the Milky Way to stop the God King of Destruction, that would mean that they were going to give up on Yang Jian and company, and no longer cared about their survival. Elder Lin estimated that if he, Yi Zichen, and everyone else at the entrance of the secret realm went to help, they had a 50% chance of survival. If they didn't go, then Yang Jian and company's chances of survival were 0. Even if they bought some time for the Milky Way galaxy, the alien races would still find the secret realm entrance and come to the Milky Way galaxy. During this period of time, they were not confident that they could punish the God King of Destruction. At that time, the Milky Way galaxy would face the difficulty of being attacked from both sides, and the result would be that it would be difficult to escape the fate of destruction. It was difficult. No one would want to make such a choice. They would have to give up on one side, and even if they gave up on the other, the result would be barely satisfactory. The godly King of Destruction is usurping the throne? How is this possible? How could the Divine Emperor die? While Elder Lin and Yi Zichen hesitated, Qing Feng's eyes widened in shock. All along, the Divine Emperor was a supreme existence in the hearts of the divine men of the outer domain celestial race. His strength caused countless planes to fear him. It was also because of his existence that the gods of the outer realm god race had the confidence to surpass other races. They believed that the Divine Emperor would always stand behind them. However, Lin Ru said that the God Emperor was dead and the God King of Destruction had taken the position of the God Emperor. Are you doubting my words? Lin Ru glared at him. No, that's absolutely not what I meant. Qing Feng shook his head vigorously. I just don't dare believe it. It wasn't just him. When Yi Zichen and Elder Lin heard this news, their hearts sank as well. However, they trusted the information Lin Ru brought back. No matter how shocked they were, they couldn't show it. They were adjudicators. They had to maintain absolute calm at all times. However, Elder Lin was puzzled. He was sure that before leaving, they'd completely sealed the God King of Destruction's Godhead and Divine Sea. Even if the God Emperor was heavily injured, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse, much less Yale, who had no divine power. Besides, the God Emperor was protected by the Angel Kings and numerous experts of the era. How could he let Yale kill him? He really couldn't understand this, but he had no choice but to accept the truth. Star-Lord Yi, what do you think? Elder Lin, who'd been unable to make a decision for a long time, tossed this problem onto Yi Zichen's shoulders. He wasn't trying to shirk responsibility. He just wanted to understand Yi Zichen's thoughts before making a decision. If even Elder Lin couldn't make up his mind, how could Yi Zichen, who'd always had trouble deciding? To tell the truth, Gu Li's evaluation of Yi Zichen was spot on. In truth, he wasn't suited to be an adjudicator. Even if his cultivation was high and his status was high, he didn't have the cold-bloodedness an adjudicator should have. He liked to hesitate, and was overcautious when faced with a problem. This was especially true when his friends and family were caught up in the maelstrom. That was the situation right now. Yang Jian and the Great Sage were close friends he couldn't bear to part with, and the Milky Way era had many of his family members. Even if the era had more friends and family than Yang Jian and the Great Sage, why should Yang Jian and the Great Sage fall into such dire straits? He couldn't make a decision. Tell me the specifics of your situation. Elder Lin could see Yi Zichen's internal struggle. Elder Lin could also see the struggle in Yi Zichen's heart, so he looked towards Qing Feng and Lin Ru. Qing Feng said to keep it short. We don't have much time. We encountered an alien with 6 arms in front of the palace. The war goddess has already confirmed that it's an alien from the universe. Right now, the people who went to search for treasures are fighting them at the palace gates. In truth, their cultivations aren't high. We can deal with them, but there's a person they call the High Priestess. The war goddess and the other overgods are still at a disadvantage. I'm here because they're doing their best to open up a gap. They told me to call for reinforcements. Qing Feng bit his lips. From his eyes, one could see the urgency in his heart. However, the palace really does need reinforcements, but the God King of Destruction. Lin Ru, go on. Just as Qing Feng was about to speak, Elder Lin immediately had Lin Ru make her report. The God King of Destruction, Yale, is unstoppable. From what I know, he's already destroyed over 3,000 planes. Countless races have been destroyed, and the experts of the era have all come out to fend off the attacks of the God race. Fortunately, Yale hasn't arrived yet. If he does, then the era won't be able to escape. Both of their words were relatively simple, but they both made the problem relatively clear. Chapter 1914. The Milky Way Galaxy. The Milky Way Galaxy had taken the master of the galaxy's untold efforts to build. No one could have imagined that it would end up like this. As far as the eye could see, all they saw were destroyed planets. Countless ruined buildings floated in the sky, swallowed up by the surrounding black holes. Remember, not long ago, when Yi Zichen and the others had first entered the secret realm, everything had been as dazzling as a painting. The God King of Destruction. Yi Zichen couldn't help but mutter the culprit behind all of this. No matter who it was, Yale's sudden usurpation of the throne and the fall of the God Emperor were both unbelievable. However, given the current situation, there was no time to be shocked. They had to digest all of this as quickly as possible and think about how to deal with it. Of course, Yi Zichen's appearance in the Milky Way galaxy meant that he'd decided to head to the new era's aid. Didn't that mean he'd given up on Yang Jian and the Great Sage? Only Yi Zichen and Lin Ru had left the secret realm. Elder Lin and the other experts had stayed behind to head to the location of the treasure. Making this decision was the best solution Yi Zichen could come up with. Both the palm and the back of his hand were flesh, and he couldn't cut them off. Even if Yi Zichen didn't go to the palace, he'd just be one less person. When he'd first made this decision, Elder Lin had opposed it. By now, Yi Zichen was no longer a dispensable character. He'd transcended the new era, and was its strongest expert. His existence could very well influence the course of the war. It was very possible that, if he and Elder Lin went to the palace or the Milky Way at the same time, they might be able to reverse the situation. But if they split up, the Milky Way wasn't strong to begin with. If they split up, both sides' forces would be mediocre, and they'd lose everything. Yi Zichen didn't agree or disagree, but he persisted. He believed that with Elder Lin leading the others to the palace, they'd be able to hold out for a while. What he needed was just to stall for time, not to win. No matter what, don't advance rashly. Just guard the entrance to the secret realm. Yi Zichen repeated the same thing over and over in his head after leaving the secret realm. He was naturally worried about the situation in the secret realm. If Elder Lin's expression was so grave, it was obvious that the outsiders couldn't be underestimated. Yi Zichen didn't want them to win. He just wanted to rely on the formation of the soul gems in the secret realm. After persevering for a while, it should be possible. He bit down hard on his lips. No matter what, since he had already left the universe's secret realm, he shouldn't be worried about the situation there. He needed to focus all his attention on the Milky Way. As for the universe's secret realm, he could only trust Elder Lin's decision-making ability. Ji Yuan should have been safe before you arrived, right? Yi Zichen suddenly spoke up. He did not ask about the situation of the entire Milky Way galaxy. He only asked about Era. To him, the Milky Way was too big. He was very clear about his own capabilities. Protecting the entire Milky Way was the job of the Master of the Milky Way, not an ordinary transcendence of an era. From the beginning to the end, what he wanted to protect was very simple. It was the epoch. Or rather, he only wanted to protect Ji Yuan's friends and family. Perhaps in the eyes of others, he was bemoaning the state of the universe and pitying the fate of mankind, like a savior who wanted to protect the world. Little did they know that deep in his heart, he was never as great as others thought he was. I guess so. Lin Ru's lack of confidence caused Yi Zichen's heart to skip a beat. Along the way, he saw the tragic state of too many destroyed planes, and his concern for the new era grew exponentially. Now that Lin Ru said it in such an uncertain tone, his eyes, which were already a little impatient, immediately reddened. How can it be considered as? Then how sure can I be? I don't know Yale very well, and I don't know the speed at which he destroys planes. Lin Ru gritted her teeth and shouted, All I know is that before I left, Yale had yet to come to this era, and the planes surrounding this era were all relatively small. Safe. However, the current battle situation was changing rapidly. I could only hope that Ji Yuan was still safe. It's not just the era, there's also the land of law. I hope it's also safe. Yi Zichen could tell that the heaviness in Lin Li's heart was no less than Yi Zichen's. Just like that, the two of them silently traversed between planes. Witnessing the devastation of the destroyed planes, their desire to return grew stronger. Kill. Era God Clan, Northern Divine Mountain. Not long ago, during God King Joy and God King Freedom's plan to destroy the new era, the Northern Divine Mountain had suffered the most. The Northern Divine Mountain's Sea Emperor, whose clansmen had practically been wiped out, was clad in his sea god's set and fighting bravely above the Sea of Innocence's surface. By his side were the few surviving clansmen of the Shui clan that remained since a long time ago. Quite a few of them were wrapped in bandages. Some had lost an eye, some had lost an arm. As far as the eye could see, it was hard to find a single uninjured clansman. Every single one of them was burning away the power of their bloodlines. They were like a pack of wolves forced into a corner. They swore to fight to the death. There was also the countless vicious beasts the Sea Emperor had once suppressed. That's right. They'd fought the Sea Emperor for countless years. Now that the Sea of Innocence was on the brink of destruction, they'd decided to fight alongside him. In front of him, there was an endless sea of well-equipped extraterritorial true gods. They'd surrounded the remaining Shui family clansmen. Judging from the current situation, it would only take a few hours to wipe out the Sea Emperor and his clansmen. The Sea of Innocence's waters were no longer as clear as before. Instead, they were blood-red. Kill! As the Sea Emperor roared, the Shui family clansmen and the vicious beasts of the sea charged the outsiders once more. Up in the sky, several Shui family clansmen and vicious beasts swayed and fell into the blood-soaked waters below. The Sea Emperor's eyes were bloodshot. He was in pain. Whether it was his clansmen, his subordinates, or the vicious beasts who'd fought against him for countless years, they were all comrades who'd fought alongside him through life and death. As the number of people around him dwindled, the wounds on his body grew more and more numerous. He looked up at his surroundings. Even though they'd been fighting for days and nights, the outsiders didn't seem to notice their numbers dwindle. For some reason, tears welled up in his eyes. My lord, didn't the Master of the Stars say these people were our allies? One of the Ocean Emperor's subordinates cried out in despair. The Ocean Emperor smiled bitterly in response. Who said otherwise? If he hadn't treated them as allies from the start, the epic era wouldn't have suffered such heavy losses. Even now, the Ocean Emperor couldn't forget the day the outsiders had come to the Epic Era under the guise of being allies. The Upheaval Alliance's vice-alliance leader Xiao Yumei and the other great emperors had come to welcome them. When they'd gone to welcome them, they'd suddenly brandished their blades. Allies? What allies? They were all fake. What's with all that nonsense? What, are you scared? The Ocean Emperor glanced at his subordinate, who instantly straightened his neck as if he'd been injected with chicken blood. Chapter 1915. May the light of life illuminate every corner of the world. Dazzling emerald light flickered in the sky. Su Yen, who had condensed the life godhead, curled up in the air and crossed her fingers. She closed her eyes and chanted piously. The godhead above her head responded to her words. After a brief tremor, the dazzling light spread out with her at the center. Heal! In an instant, the curled-up Su Yen spread her arms wide. Countless warriors in the light were baptized by the healing light. Their injuries healed even more directly than medicinal pills, healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Not only that, when the healing light ended, Su Yan's brows sank. Her lips kept moving, and energy streaks were released from her godhead. Inspire! Life Godhead! Not far away, the invading Protoss experts muttered, their eyes filled with indescribable solemnity. This is so troublesome. The one who spoke was one of the primary gods under Yale's command. Through their investigations, the god, Yao, and demon races had discovered that the Yao race had been internally divided not long ago. 2 of the 4 Yao races had been punished for their rebellion. It could be said that the Yao race was the weakest of the 3 factions. The sovereigns under Yale's command had noticed this as well, and had wanted to choose an easy task. But what they didn't expect was to encounter resistance as soon as they entered. Even now, they couldn't advance even half a step. Their biggest obstacle was Su Yen, the Life Master God. Due to the Life Godhead's uniqueness, it inherited the status of a Master God. In other words, it was equal to Yale's other Master Gods. But the Life Godhead was an auxiliary Godhead. In terms of combat strength, it couldn't compare to any Master God. But, however, its support ability was enough to give a God King a headache. Heal. Revive. Inspire. The Life Godhead's 3 most ordinary Godhead skills could increase the Yao race's combat strength severalfold. In terms of strength, the Protoss were far superior to the Yao race. The Yao warriors indeed couldn't gain an advantage against the Protoss, but they had the support of the Life Master God. Heal when injured. Revive when unconscious. Encourage when passive. So much so that even if the Protoss had the advantage in numbers and realms, the experts of the Demon Clan would still rush forward as if they had been injected with chicken blood. Up until now, the extraterritorial divine race's casualties were probably even more severe than the demon race's. We have to think of a countermeasure. If we wait for Lord Yale to arrive and see that we didn't even manage to kill our way into the Yao clan's hinterland, it's a small matter if he's disappointed in us. However, if he takes his anger out on us for not doing our job well, we won't even be able to keep our heads. The sovereign with the scar at the corner of his eye shouted frantically, and the other sovereigns nodded in agreement. Don't be fooled by the fact that they were sovereigns under Yale's command and had followed him for tens of thousands of years. However, they knew very well in their hearts that they were not even pawns in Yale's eyes. Chess pieces still had value, and they were at most dispensable lackeys. Moreover, now that Yale had ascended to the throne of the Emperor God, he, who had all the power in the world, had no lack of dogs. If they didn't do their job well, Yale could replace them without any qualms. He believed that there were many people in the Outer Realm God race waiting to take their place. Revive. The life goddess Su Yen continued to unleash her divine skills, and the Yao clan's warriors also surged forward to attack the Outer Realm God race's formation. What else can we do? Kill her. Suddenly, the overgods of the Outer Realm turned to look at Su Yen. If they wanted to destroy the Yao clan, they had to get rid of Su Yen, who was supporting them from behind. At this time, they couldn't help but feel ashamed of their previous ignorance. They had never taken auxiliary sovereigns seriously. In their eyes, only auxiliary sovereigns were the way of the king. This time, they truly witnessed the power of auxiliary sovereigns. She alone could make it difficult for the Yao clan's outer realm god race army to advance. She had to die. The commanding overgods standing in the sky locked their gazes on Su Yan. Without any unnecessary communication, a total of 6 overgods turned into 6 streaks of light, drawing long trails of light in the sky as they shot towards Su Yan. Golden dragon roar! Scorching dragon breath suddenly sprayed towards the 6 overgods. As overgod experts, they had long since experienced this sort of sudden situation far too many times. They didn't pay too much attention to it. They gently pushed their palms forward and condensed a shield. The dragon breath landed on the shield, and the splashing dragon breath directly turned the surrounding gods into pools of blood. Even the overgods couldn't help but feel their eyelids twitch at the heat. They inwardly rejoiced that they'd reacted in time. However, at this moment, the thick dragon tail had already heavily smashed into their shields. The powerful tremors caused the arms of the shield-wielding overgods to go slightly numb, and they were sent flying backwards. You want to bully Susu? Do you think big sister Kiki isn't here? Instantly, a rather cute yet arrogant chuckle appeared in the sky. Everyone then saw a golden dragon several hundred meters long circling above Su Yan's head. The dragon's eyes were filled with disdain as it looked lazily at the overgods. Susu, don't be afraid. Kiki will protect you. The golden dragon was Su Yan's best friend, Xia Kiki. No one could believe that she'd grown to such a level after staying in the time artifact for half a year. If the head of the dragon race saw this, he'd definitely be moved to tears and sigh to the heavens. The dragon race finally had a successor. Su Yan only smiled in response. Right now, she only looked relaxed on the surface. In order to unleash a divine skill on such a large scale, she had to maintain a high level of mental tension so that she wouldn't make any mistake. At the same time, she tried her best to expand the range of the divine skill. It could be said that this battle was actually a game between her and the god. It was easy to imagine how much pressure she was under when she faced such a vast army of the gods alone. Golden dragon. I didn't think there'd be such a primordial divine beast in this era. I wonder if your golden dragon has 5 claws. The repulsed overgod snorted with a sinister smile. Scatter. A golden dragon without 5 claws wants to stop 6 of us overgods? It's basically... The overgod's words came to an abrupt halt. It wasn't just the gods. Even the many experts of the Yao race felt a chill wash over them. All the demons who sensed this chill subconsciously swallowed their saliva and quietly retreated. Then, snowflakes began to fall from the sky. At the center of the snowflakes, a prideful, queen-like woman slowly floated above everyone's heads. Chapter 1916. Frost filled the sky and drifted down to the ground. Everyone in the Yao race knew who had arrived. The experts of the Nine-Tailed Fox clan who'd been fighting the Outlanders all retreated. Their leaders looked up at the sky. Big Sister Lu, you stole the limelight as soon as you appeared. Up in the sky, the golden dragon sighed sadly, then transformed into a cute young girl. She glanced at Su Yan as if seeking comfort. Su Lu's entrance was far too flashy. Even if she transformed into a golden dragon, she wouldn't be able to steal the limelight. Su Yan simply shrugged. Her big sister had always been like this. An expert. The overgods of the god race furrowed their eyebrows slightly as well. The ordinary-looking snowflakes hid frightening power within them. Although the frigid air didn't mean much to them, they firmly believed. If the snowflakes in the sky truly attacked, even they, the overgods, would feel threatened. Big Sister Lu, I haven't had enough fun yet. Why did you come out? Susu will definitely be fine with me here. Xia Kiki pouted and yelled at the sky, her expression filled with displeasure. You little brat, you really are arrogant. Not even the head of the dragon race would dare say something like that. As she spoke, Su Lu slowly landed in front of Su Yen, atop her snow-white lotus. She looked at Su Yen dotingly, but also a little heartache, then tousled Xia Kik's hair. "Leave them to me. Can you stay here and protect little Yen?" "No problem. Leave Susu's safety to me." Xia Kiki puffed out her chest and giggled. Su Lu looked deeply into Su Yan's eyes. The two of them nodded at each other, then Su Lu stepped forward 100 meters. "The Outlanders." Su Lu's icy voice seemed to descend from the 9 heavens. Frost swirled around her, and a heart-chilling coldness filled her eyes. She glared at the over-gods, her gaze forceful. "I've long since heard of you, but I've never seen you in person. Now I'll give you 2 choices. Surrender or be completely annihilated." Instantly, Su Lu's body emanated an incomparably tyrannical aura. The surrounding cold air also became rapid at this moment. Her face was filled with a cold beauty that looked down on the world. "Wow, Big Sister Lu is so domineering. If I didn't have Yeezy in my heart, Big Brother would fall in love with her." Xia Kiki smiled with a heart in her eyes. Hearing this, Su Yen didn't comment. Su Lu had always acted like a queen. Quite a few people fell head over heels for her cold elegance. "I didn't have a deep understanding of your era before, but after coming here, I've really discovered that you all have something in common." The Outerium Protoss chief god snorted enigmatically. "What?" asked Su Lu indifferently. "Arrogant." As soon as he finished speaking, a godhead suddenly appeared above the chief god's head, and violent divine power gushed out like a broken dam. The Yao experts couldn't help but shudder in fear. Su Lu stood in the center of the vortex, her eyes still filled with disdain. He felt disdain towards this sovereign's provocation. "Don't just stand there. If Sir Yale hadn't flattened this place before he arrived, none of us would have been able to escape." It was also these words that caused a commotion to appear in the Outerium divine race. Everyone could clearly see that there were quite a number of people within, whose brows were filled with struggle. Soon after, they slowly walked out from within. Every single one of them had a godhead above their heads, and their auras were all at the over-god realm. As far as the eye could see, there were 20 of them. Big Sister Xia Kik's heart jolted. She never would have guessed that the over-gods who just appeared weren't all of the Outerium's over-god experts. There were 20 over-gods, even if it was Su Lu standing in front of them. "Protect Lil Yen." Su Lu whipped her head around, her voice brooking no argument. Xia Kiki, who'd been just about to transform into her golden dragon, bit her lip and retreated. However, the 20 over-gods still made her frown deeply. "Attack." The Outerium chief god didn't wait any longer. 20 over-god experts attacked Su Lu from all sides. Quite a few Yao experts clenched their fists. Although they'd never clashed with an over-god before, they could tell just how strong they were from their auras. Su Lu, the future of the 9-tailed fox clan, the successor of the Breath of Ice, the master of martial songs, one of the 4 auxiliary stars. Even without the Empress, he could be considered the strongest expert in the Eastern Empire. Even Su Wanner, the head of the Fox clan, wouldn't be a match for him after she activated the Breath of Ice and the auxiliary stars. If she fell here, she'd break the backbone of the entire Yao race. No one could stand in the way of the Outerium gods. The Yao race would no longer have any defensive barriers. Encourage. Fully aware of this, Su Yen seized the opportunity to use a supplementary battle technique on Su Lu. Su Lu instinctively glanced at her, then smiled at her. "How dare you get distracted?" A long blade suddenly appeared in the overgod's hand. The blade glinted with cold light as it sliced precisely at Su Lu's snow-white neck. "Big Sister Lu!" cried Xia Kiki wide-eyed. Ding! A crisp sound rang out in everyone's ears. Then they saw a silver iron staff stop in front of the overgod's blade. "Big Sister Lu, can't you be a little more serious? He's a lord of the outer realm, not a little dull. The words of complaint came from a young man with a hogue on top of his head. When he spoke, the erect hogue even shook twice spiritually, as if it was nodding. "I'm just testing you," said Su Luer, completely unconcerned. "Spare me," said the ahogue helplessly. "I hate scenes of a hero saving a damsel in distress. Besides, a damsel like you can't possibly repay me with your body. If you keep talking glibly outside, Lori might find out." Suddenly, a fatty in cyan robes appeared beside Su Luer and the ahogue. "If you dare tell Lori about this, I'll fight you to the death." The ahogue glared at the fatty, then rolled his eyes. "You're too slow. You should lose some weight." "Bullshit. This is my standard body." The fatty glared at him. "There's still someone behind me. What's there to be anxious about? Then are you trying to say I'm fatter than you?" At that moment, a soft voice echoed through the sky. Then, a long river with no end in sight poured down from the sky. Above the river stood a man in a black robe. When it was almost Su Luer's group, he leaped down from the river and stood beside the fatty. This, Xia Kiki, who'd been filled with anxiety just a moment ago, instantly froze. She looked at the four people standing together. Chapter 1917. Now that the Lord of the Emperor's Star had transcended, the four great auxiliary stars gradually entered everyone's sights. When the Emperor's Star wasn't in the Emperor's Star, most matters within the era were handled by the four great auxiliary stars and the higher-ups of the Upheaval Alliance. As a result, the people of the era, whether they were old or young, were no strangers to them. When the demon race's mighty figures saw the appearance of the four auxiliary stars, their worries lessened significantly. No matter what, the Emperor's Star wasn't in the era. If the four auxiliary stars went all out, they could be considered the strongest after the Emperor's Star. Even the rare half-step transcendence cultivators of the era could only fight evenly against them. This was the power of Starlight. After fusing with Starlight, even the most ordinary Lord of the Stars could increase his strength several-fold. This was especially true during this period of time, as the Society of Saints continuously researched and developed the power of the stars. The Lord of the Stars had become even more proficient at using Starlight. The Star Altar had long since become one of the era's pillars. However, since when did they get along so well? The Yao experts couldn't help but mutter to themselves. It wasn't as if they'd never seen the four auxiliary stars gather before. Half a year ago, they hadn't even gotten along so well. Judging from their words and actions, it was as if they'd known each other for many years. What was even more unbelievable was that the Fox clan's cold queen, Su Luer, would smile faintly when she saw them. This was something the Yao emperors had never seen before. No matter the occasion, this cold queen's expression was as cold as ice. Her words and actions radiated a coldness that kept everyone at arm's length. Only in front of her relatives, Su Yen and Su Zhe, would her expression soften slightly. When she faced her other clansmen, she remained as cold as ever. Just now or she'd actually smiled. Although it was very faint, she definitely smiled. Su Luer naturally didn't notice that her actions had shocked the Yao experts so much. In truth, even she herself hadn't realized she'd smiled just now. It had all been a subconscious reaction. In truth, in her heart, she was still as cold as a mountain of ice. Perhaps it could be said that the moment that person died in front of her, her heart had been sealed. She could no longer melt for anyone else. With his heart sealed in ice, how could he possibly smile? Why would she subconsciously smile at her colleagues? Perhaps it was all because of the influence of the previous auxiliary planet lord. Indeed, the four great auxiliary stars had only known each other for a short time, but their relationship had improved very quickly. The reason for this might be because, that reign of stars, this reign was very special. Only the Lord of the Stars could sense its existence. Only the true Lord of the Stars, who had once been chosen by the stars, could sense the existence of that reign. That night the Milky Way shone brightly. The star lords of the Brahma star system had gathered in the galaxy. They had all found their own stars in that reign, obtained the inheritance of the previous Star Lord, and carried the memories of the previous Star Lord. At that time, none of them understood the purpose of the reign. It wasn't until the God Race's sudden invasion that these Star Lords realized the reason for the reign's appearance. Stop messing around here. Hurry up and deal with these people. The sooner we deal with them, the sooner we can call it a day. Looking at her three colleagues, Su Luer couldn't help but shake her head helplessly. In truth, according to the system of the Star Dynasty, the Minister of the Left was subordinate to the Prime Minister. He was the one with the highest status among the 4 auxiliary stars. But even with the memories of the previous Star Lord, Su Luer's influence on them was probably even deeper. In the end, Su Luer of the Martial Song Star still held the leading position among them. When they heard Big Sister Luer's words, the other 3 auxiliary stars tactfully shut their mouth. Go Yuzhan was even more obsequious. A silver staff suddenly appeared in his hand, and he held it against his neck with both hands. He looked very much like a young supreme. Treasure. Big Sister Luer, just tell us who to fight. We're your soldiers. We'll fight wherever you say. When Yin Shang and Emperor Hades saw this, they couldn't help but twitch their lips in disgust. Judging from the shape of their lips, they seemed to be saying lackeys. Although they scoffed at Go Yuzhan's behavior, Yin Shang and Emperor Hades took out their own treasures. The 8-formation origin chart hovered above Yin Shang's head. Emperor Hades' treasure was even more impressive. It was the river Styx, which had once stood guard between the human and Yao realms. The 4 of them stood proudly, as if they were an impregnable wall. They stood outside the great gates of the Yao realm. Where should we fight? Su Luer raised her eyebrows, then her gaze fell on the overgod who'd attacked her first. I don't like the look of him. How about we finish him off first? All right, go ahead. With that, the 4 auxiliary stars attacked simultaneously. Even though the arrival of the 4 auxiliary stars had caught the overgods off guard, their strength was still there for all to see. There was no need for them to feel fear over this. At practically the same time, the God Race experts attacked one after the other. Kill. As the generals clashed, the soldiers below them didn't sit idle either. In the blink of an eye, the experts of the God Race and Yao Race clashed. Revive. Heal. Encourage. The life goddess Su Yen unleashed her divine techniques without pause. For a moment, the Yao realm descended into chaos. Hey, that's not right. At that moment, Xia Kiki, who'd been assigned to protect Su Yen, furrowed her brows. Every corner of the new era should be engulfed in the flames of war. Based on her years of experience watching dramas, if Yi Zichen was emperor, his foundation lay in the God Race. As officials of the Star Dynasty, the 4 auxiliary stars were supposed to protect the God Race. Perhaps Su Luer belonged to the Yao Race and cared about them, so she appeared to help them quell the chaos. The other 3 auxiliary stars were all God Race members. Why had they appeared here? Did they no longer care about their country? Or perhaps the God Race had already settled the flames of war, so they'd come to the Yao realm to quell the chaos. But even so, would they dare leave the God Race during these special times? Even if the flames of war subsided, they'd stay behind to protect the God Race, lest chaos reappear. For Big Sister Luer's sake. That was possible, but it was minuscule. In summary, there was only one possibility for the 4 of them to appear in the Yao realm. They'd received orders. And the only person who could order them was. Boom. Boom. Cannon fire roared. Countless shells suddenly appeared in front of Xia Kiki, exploding in the midst of the God Race troop. Chapter 1918. Cannon fire rumbled. Hundreds of cannons stood in the air above the Yao territory. Their muzzles flashed with light, and a constant stream of spiritual energy condensed shells landed accurately within range of the Outerium gods. The Yao experts, however, were lucky enough to survive. When the Outerium gods charged, the Yao experts acted as if they were fainting. Halfway through their charge, they suddenly dodged to the side. As a result, the entire sky was filled with Outarium gods, and the cannonballs landed among them without a care in the world. Suddenly, "Hey, how are you guys?" Suddenly, Xia Kiki felt someone pat her on the shoulder. She turned around and saw Zhuo standing behind her, a smile on her face. "Why are you here too?" They were all inextricably linked to Yi Zichen, so they naturally knew each other. When she saw the 4 auxiliary stars come to the Yao race's aid, Xia Kiki was already in a daze. "Now, Zhuo was here too. Have you resolved the situation with the gods?" "You could say so." Zhuo stretched lazily and shrugged. "There are still a few gods left, but with the ancients around, it's only a matter of time before we capture them." With that, Zhuo took out a pair of binoculars. She stared at them for a long time. "You guys really are amazing. The Outarium gods should have attacked the Yao and God realms at the same time, but they haven't even broken through your gates." "It's all thanks to Susu," said Xia Kiki with a smile. Xia Kiki giggled. Su Yan also nodded towards Zhuo, her face filled with exhaustion. "Hey, did your research department develop all these cannons?" asked Xia Kiki. Cannon fire rained down from the sky. The power of these cannons couldn't be underestimated. After a few volleys, the Outarium gods suffered far more casualties than the Yao had ever suffered. Every volley posed a fatal threat to the extraterritorial deities. Quite a few gods were thrown into disarray. Some tried to leave the range of the cannons, while others tried to defend themselves. However, the cannons were merciless. Their overwhelming firepower made it impossible for them to do anything. All they could do was become live targets for the cannons. Such powerful weapons of war were impossible to ignore even if they wanted to. "You could say so, but we're just assembling them according to the blueprint." In order to forge these god-powered cannons, almost all the blacksmiths of the celestial race had come. After staying in the time artifact for half a year, there are only 200 finished products. Zhuo walked up to Su Yan as she spoke. She gently wiped away the sweat on Su Yan's face with the silk handkerchief in her hand. From the beginning of the god race's invasion of the Yao race, Su Yan had used the life godhead's divine skill to support the Yao race's clansmen, allowing the Yao race to remain invincible. She had not rested for a long time, so one could imagine how much energy she had consumed. He took out a pill from his pocket and gently placed it next to Su Yan's lip. "Take a break, don't force yourself. With us here, the fate of those extraterritorial deities has already been decided. If you tire yourself out, someone will feel sorry for you." Su Yan, who was just about to thank him, suddenly froze. Xia Kiki's eyes also widened, and her spirited eyes couldn't help but look around. "He's here too." "That's right. If it wasn't for him, who else would be able to command the 4 auxiliary stars and 200 god-powered cannons?" Zhuo chuckled, then glanced at Su Yan's pretty face. A hint of jealousy flashed through her eyes. You might not know how anxious he was back then. 200 god-powered cannons fired in unison. The god-powered cannons were different from the modern realm's cannons. Their construction was much more complicated. Otherwise, all the master blacksmiths of the god race wouldn't have spent half a year in the divine artifact of time only producing this much. 200 of them. The god-powered cannons used spiritual energy, not cannonballs. Every round of firing required the spiritual energy of at least a god general. Hence, beside the god-powered cannon, there were at least 10 god generals guarding each cannon. When a divine general ran out of spiritual energy, he would immediately use a divine-grade spirit recovery pill to recover. A single volley was equivalent to 200 divine-grade spiritual recovery pills. Fire as hard as you can. Wherever you see the most people, fire! A red-faced youth stood atop the cannons. He pointed ahead and shouted at the top of his lungs. He was Yi Zichen. His eyes were bloodshot, and his face was so red it reached his neck. Every vein in his body bulged, and the veins on his neck and forehead bulged. Although he'd mentally prepared himself on the way back, He never would have guessed the first era would fall into such dire straits. The god race had suffered heavy losses. More than 40% of the 9 divine mountains people had died. As far as the eye could see, there was nothing but ruins. There were also groups of 2 or 3 gathered together, fighting the gods of the outside. Tragic. Tragic was the only word that could describe the war between the god race and the outside. Blood flowed for tens of thousands of miles. Even standing in the atmosphere, one could smell the acrid stench of blood. The northern divine mountain had already suffered heavy losses during God King Pleasure's reign. Now, not even a tenth of its clansmen survived this battle. The other divine mountains and sacred lands weren't faring much better. The divine mountain emperors were all in full armor, and even their clansmen had gone into seclusion. Even their elders had emerged from seclusion. All for the sake of surviving the first era's calamity. Yi Zichen's heart ached. In truth, after transcending, he could have set up a defensive barrier around the first era, just like he'd done in the first era. But he hadn't done so because it would have taken a lot of time. The situation in the secret realm of the universe was urgent. Coincidentally, the God Emperor had signed an alliance agreement with the First Era, so he felt like the First Era might be safe. In the end, Yale had usurped the throne, and the God race had turned the tables. The First Era, who'd once been a thorn in Yale's side, had become his target of destruction. When Yi Zichen first arrived in the skies above the First Era, he'd personally witnessed the gods of the outside brutally murder a defenseless mother with a baby in her arms. After all, the mother was just an ordinary Earth Supreme. The baby she carried wasn't even a year old. She'd already knelt and begged the gods to spare her. Even if it meant sparing the baby's life. These extraterritorial gods were like cruel executioners. They slashed at the mother's body, not even sparing the baby in her arms. War was cruel. Yi Zichen was well aware of this. No matter how much Yale and the gods of the outside viewed him as an enemy. Wasn't it a little too much for them to put the butcher's knife on those innocent people? Chapter 1919. The god-powered cannon's muzzle flashed brilliantly. The experts of the demon clan couldn't help revealing shock on their faces as they watched the gods of the foreign domain god clan and heard their miserable shrieks. They'd fought the outsiders for several days now. They knew full well how difficult they were to deal with. Even with the goddess of life's assistance, they could only hold their ground at the Yao's entrance. They couldn't push them back. But now these 200 cannons had accomplished something the Yao had never accomplished before. The celestial race, which used to be filled with mighty celestial warriors, had brought a huge visual impact to the demon race. But now it had become a disaster for the celestial race. It had become the god-powered cannon's favorite firing environment. Boom! Another round of god-powered cannons fired. Once a divine general ran out of spiritual energy and left the god-powered cannon, other divine generals would take his place without delay. It's worth mentioning that the god-powered cannon was truly miraculous against the outsiders. No wonder the First Era's Master of the Stars had specially given Yi Zichen its blueprint. Whether it was the pill recipe or the god-powered cannon's blueprint, they were all weapons against the god race. These cannons are really vicious. Go Yuzhan rubbed his ahog. Just now, a cannon had flown right past his head. The energy of the cannon had numbed his scalp. He couldn't help but rub his head to make sure his ahog was still there. Only then did he relax. How could this be? Even the god race's overgods didn't act rashly after seeing the cannon fire. Not to mention the gods from the outer realms, even they, the overgods, could smell the danger from the cannon fire. Countless gods had been gravely injured or killed. All of this was seen by the sovereigns. In just a few short minutes, the outsiders had suffered grievous losses. They couldn't let this go on. That was the thought in the overgods' minds. With the goddess of life's assistance, it was already extremely difficult for the outsiders to attack the Yao. The 4 people in front of them weren't mediocre either. Now 200 cannons had appeared. They had to retreat. Even if they were rebuked by the God Emperor of Annihilation, they couldn't force themselves to persist. They could not see any hope at all. As long as the cannon fire did not stop, the casualties of the extraterritorial true gods would only increase. They were not puppets, they had their own thoughts. In a situation where they knew that they would be sending themselves to their deaths, and in a situation where they could not see any hope at all, there was no way they could brace themselves and lead millions of true gods into the abyss. Bang! Without any prior agreement, the 20 overgods all raised their presences at virtually the same time. The divine power that leaked out caused heaven and earth to darken. The wind howled, and the only thing that could be seen in the dusky heaven and earth were their dazzling divine sparks. The 4 auxiliary stars couldn't help but feel apprehensive when they saw this. He stopped chatting and focused on the many sovereigns in front of him. No matter what, master gods were considered peak existences in the outer realm god race. Even though they were auxiliary stars and could absorb starlight into their bodies, they still had to be cautious when facing master gods who outnumbered them 5 to 1. From the looks of it, they seemed to want to fight to the death with them. The howling winds were accompanied by ear-piercing wails as sand and stones swept past the 4 auxiliary stars and the foreign realm overgods. No one made a move, but it could be seen that both sides were very cautious. For some reason, the divine cannons stopped firing, but the frightened gods were still in a state of chaos. No matter how much their superiors shouted at them, they could not maintain order. Third Era, you really do have some tricks up your sleeves. The overgod in the lead stared at the 4 auxiliary stars, his eyes flashing sinisterly. He nodded solemnly, then swept his gaze across the gods behind him. When he saw that more than half of his troops had been injured, the sinister glint in his eyes became even more obvious. We have nothing to say to those who betray our allies. As she spoke, the temperature plummeted. In less than half a breath's worth of time, the temperature dropped to below 0. The Yao territory was covered in thick snow, and the rivers showed signs of freezing. Ha! The overgod sneered, but he couldn't hide his shock. It was just as he'd thought. This woman who played with ice and snow was not to be underestimated. Although the others by her side hadn't revealed their true strength, since they'd traveled with her, they weren't too far behind. What's more, that hairy guy had blocked his dagger. Even before that, he hadn't sensed how he'd appeared. He glanced at the divine cannons in the sky. It seemed that although the cannons were powerful, they consumed an enormous amount of energy. The cannons had stopped firing, no surprise, because they couldn't replenish their energy. This was an opportunity for the Outerium god race, whether they attacked the Yao territory or retreated. Between the two choices, the overgod, who seemed to be their commander, decided to retreat. No one knew when the divine cannon's energy would be replenished. If the cannons were replenished while they were attacking, the gods would lose everything. Furthermore, they had no way of dealing with the goddess of life. Before coming, they'd underestimated the First Era's power. Now they had to retreat and think things over. Whoosh! A blazing inferno suddenly appeared in the sovereign's palm, and the temperature released by the flames also slightly warmed the surrounding cold. Go Yuzhan strode forward, his silver staff in both hands. Emperor Hades, Su-Yun, was surrounded by a long river. Black light flashed in his eyes. The 8-formation origin diagram lay flat beneath his feet. Yin Shang stood at the eye of the formation. Su Lu stood at the very back, her icy aura abnormally turbulent. Retreat! At that moment, the 4 auxiliary stars prepared for the final battle. To everyone's surprise, the overgod flung the flames in his hands at them, then turned to leave. Go Yuzhan scattered the flames with a swing of his staff. There was nothing special about them at all. In terms of attack power, they couldn't even compare to a divine general's all-out attack. They've been intimidated. Yin Shang's expression was unsightly. At the end of the day, they were still too afraid of the gods. They hadn't seen through the gods' ploy. The mighty army of gods retreated. If they chased after them now, they could easily kill a few, but the overgods wouldn't be able to catch up. If they couldn't capture their commander, what was the point of capturing more soldiers? The 4 auxiliary stars angrily waved their hands. Su Lu gnashed her teeth, her expression unfriendly. However, at that moment a huge flaming net almost covered the entire heavenly region, completely sealing off the retreat route of the foreign domain god race. Chapter 1920. The net of flames was like a giant cage, sealing off all escape routes for the god race overgods. The overgods stopped right in front of the net. The whispers in the sky caused them to knit their brows. When they looked up, they saw Yi Zichen smiling down at them. Lord of the era. Every god race overgod recognized Yi Zichen. The former god emperor's alliance had been announced to the entire race. All of the outer realm god race experts participated in that alliance assembly. There was no way the god race overgods were mistaken. The man in the sky was the Lord of the era. The information they'd received didn't say that the Lord of the era had gone to a secret realm. How had he received word that the era had been gravely injured? Could it be that someone from the era had gone to notify him? In that case, everyone in the secret realm already knew that Yale had ascended to the God Emperor's throne. Then the King of the Laws, when they thought of Elder Lin, a hint of panic appeared in the eyes of the trapped sovereigns. Every God race member knew of Elder Lin's relationship with the God Emperor. Furthermore, he was on the same level as the God Emperor. If the old man found out, wouldn't he be so angry that he'd implicate them as well? Although they'd come to attack the God race, most of them had been coerced by Yale. They didn't want to do this. The Lord of the era had returned. Could it be that Elder Lin was here too? Everyone, it seems you're afraid of something. Yi Zichen smiled and slowly descended from the sky. The 5 elemental spirits followed him, and the fire elemental spirit stretched out a hand. It seemed to be controlling the net of flames. Along the way, Yi Zichen tilted his head and glanced at the fire elemental spirit. The net of flames that covered half the sky shrunk until it was only enough to trap the overgods. The god race members who'd escaped didn't even think about it. With that thought in mind, no one paid any attention to the master gods who were still trapped. They fled out of the epoch without even looking back. They didn't want to experience the bombardment of cannon fire again. If they stayed in the era, who knew how many of them would survive? The overgods naturally saw this as well. They could only watch helplessly as their subordinates fled. Although the sovereigns were enraged, there was nothing they could do. From the epic Starlord's actions, they knew very well that the Starlord only wanted to keep them, the overgods, behind from the very beginning. Are you all afraid of me? Yi Zichen, who'd already landed in front of the lords, chuckled. His completely defenseless lips curled into a bitter smile. I don't think so. If you're really afraid of me, you wouldn't have attacked me with such great fanfare. Since you've done this, it means that you don't care about me, a Star Lord of an era. Of course there is. Some of them were coerced. The sovereigns, hearing this, were silent. As the flame net shrank, its fire elemental essence became more concentrated. Previously, the sovereigns had only felt scorching heat, but now they felt scorching heat. That steaming heat wave made them sweat profusely. The sweat that flowed out was instantly evaporated into water vapor, and the water in his body was also being rapidly consumed. Puff! At that moment, several jets of water splashed onto their bodies. The sovereigns, who'd nearly fainted from the heat, regained some of their senses. Yi Zichen gently patted the water elemental fairy on the head. Not bad. After praising them, Yi Zichen glanced at the outer realm overgods and gestured for the fire elemental fairy to lower the temperature of the net. The scorching heat gradually subsided. The near-dehydrated sovereigns collapsed to the ground, paralyzed. At first, they'd been too afraid to break free. Now, even if they wanted to, their bodies wouldn't allow them to. Some of you were loyal to the former God Emperor, right? Yi Zichen slowly knelt on the ground and looked at the sovereigns. The sovereigns merely glanced at him. Although their expressions varied, they said nothing. I know there are definitely some among you. In truth, you only attacked the epic because you were threatened by Yale. I know all this because I trust the former God Emperor. He told me that most of the gods of the outer realm are peace-loving. What's the point of saying all this? Are you going to let us go? Sneered one of the sovereigns. The speaker was an overgod loyal to the former God Emperor. It was just as Yi Zichen had said. He'd come to attack the epic because he was threatened. His wife and daughter were in Yale's hands. He had no choice but to come. From the moment he'd set foot in the epic, he'd never thought he'd be able to return alive. Even after everything Yi Zichen had said, he'd never thought he'd let him go. In any case, he'd come here for whatever reason. The instant he'd brandished his blade at the epic clansman, he'd already stood against the epic. The epic's Lord of Stars. How could someone who'd reached such a position be merciful? How could he possibly let his executioners leave after slaughtering his own people? Do you think that's possible? As expected, Yi Zichen stood outside the net of flames and formed a screen of water with a wave of his hand. Shockingly, the images he saw when he'd first entered the epic were of women and children he couldn't save in time. They died at the hands of outsiders. If I let you go, who's going to pay for their lives? Many of the sovereigns looked away. In truth, most of them didn't like war. They all had children, so they understood the despair and pain in the images. However, in this war of aggression and destruction, they'd played the role of the invaders. Given what had already happened, their grief was superfluous. That's what I saw. I don't know how many more there are. He clenched his fists and shattered the screen of water. He gnashed his teeth and glared at the sovereigns. He didn't even try to hide his anger. I really want to grind your bones to dust, but my anger can't make me lose my mind. I'm well aware that you're merely executioners. The true mastermind is your God Emperor, Yale. I'll give you a chance right now. Yi Zichen took a deep breath, narrowed his eyes, and took a few steps back. He glanced at the fire elemental sprite, who understood and expanded the cage to roughly 100,000 cubic meters. I trust you've all seen the Beast Colosseum before? It's just that before you were the ones watching others. Now I'm the one watching you. In this cage, whoever stands until the end will be able to leave this place and reunite with your loved ones. Chapter 1921. There was no room to maneuver. The flame arena trapped the overgods inside. In order to ensure that they could carry out Yi Zichen's demands, the arena's area shrank as time passed. A total of 20 overgods were scattered throughout the arena. Even if they were once good friends, at this moment, they subconsciously separated from the people around them and looked at each other. Suspicion. Suspicion. Every expert in the arena had strange thoughts, and they all knew that every single one of them wanted to live. Star-Lord Yi, you're truly skilled. At that moment, a man with long hair covering his face stepped out from a corner of the arena. He gripped a heavy hammer in his right hand. His muscles rippled with power, and his entire body radiated explosive power. The moment he moved, the other overgods in the arena instinctively made way for him. From this, it was clear that this overgod held a fairly high position among them. Even if that weren't the case, he was still far stronger than the other overgods. He didn't attack anyone. Instead, he hefted his hammer and walked up to the spot closest to Yi Zichen. You trapped us here and forced us to kill each other for a chance to survive. This is my final mercy for you, said Yi Zichen expressionlessly. Mercy? The hammer-wielding overgod threw his head back and laughed, then his gaze darkened. Like a wild beast about to break out of its cage, his gaze filled with aggression. Thank you for your mercy, but the way I see it. Dong. He swung his hammer, and his godhead flashed with light. In everyone's line of sight, they could only see a silver ray of light streaking across the cage of the battle arena. The cage that was constructed from flames was cut open. A fierce gust of wind blew against Yi Zichen's face. He stood in front of the open cage and heard an angry roar. It's best to keep your fate in your own hands. The hammer came crashing down. Yi Zichen swung his hammer, his explosive strength rippling the air below him. Star Lord Yi! Yi! Everyone present paled in shock. They all stared at Yi Zichen's position, their hearts in their throats. Emperor Hades, Suiyun, stepped through the air and shot towards Yi Zichen. Yin Shang, Go Yuzhan, and Su Luer followed closely behind. Several elemental spirits also gathered towards his position, but when the light dissipated, they saw, fate should indeed be grasped in our own hands. Yi Zichen gently gripped the warhammer. The overgod's eyes were filled with terror. He tried to pull the warhammer back, but to no avail. But at least you have to have the ability, right? Puff, no one could see what had happened. All they saw was that the chest of the Lord God holding the heavy hammer had caved in. Golden blood spurted out of his mouth like golden rain. That resplendent godhead was also instantly covered in cracks, and it dimmed without any light. He glanced at the crack in the arena. The instant Yi Zichen's gaze landed on them, the outsider overgods, who'd wanted to take advantage of the chaos to escape, instinctively retreated back into the arena. As I said, this is my kindness to you. Yi Zichen gently tossed the overgod out of the sky. The overgod didn't struggle at all as he plummeted straight to the ground. All the sovereigns who saw this couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. That was one of the strongest existences amongst them, yet he couldn't even last a single round against the epic Star Lord. What exactly had the epic Star Lord experienced in less than half a year for him to grow to this level? Killing that overgod was like killing a chicken to warn the monkeys. Every outsider overgod felt insecure. Even before the overgod's death, some of them had wanted to take control of their own fates and resist. Now, however, they put aside such thoughts. In front of them, there was only one path of survival. It was to survive in this arena. Let's begin. My patience is limited, and so is my time. Stop making trouble for me. He suddenly turned around, and the arena flashed with light. To Yi Zichen, this battle was no longer worth watching. He'd never wanted to enjoy the final struggle of these hopeless cultivators. His goal was simple: to exhaust the god race's strength and to get Yale to come over. The universe's secret realm was still waiting for him. The great sage and Yang Jian were both in dire straits. He had to deal with everything as quickly as possible, then rush to the secret realm and fight alongside them. An hour passed in the blink of an eye. The entire Yao race watched as the god race overgods clashed, watched as they died one after another at the hands of their own clansmen. In this arena, it was as if they'd seen the truest form of human nature: plot, betrayal. They were willing to do anything to survive. This was a battle for survival, and it vividly displayed the inferiority of humans, or rather, all living creatures. If it weren't for this moment, the god race overgods might not even have known they were capable of such despicable acts. When the second-to-last godhead shattered, the overgod's eyes lost all color, and he fell from the sky above the flaming cage. The surviving overgod sat paralyzed on the ground, panting heavily, but his eyes shone with dazzling light. He'd survived. In this desperate battle, he had survived. This surviving overgod wasn't the strongest among them, but he displayed his inferiority to the fullest. In order to survive, he'd formed an alliance with someone else, gotten rid of his greatest threat, and then attacked his allies. The flame arena dispersed. Yi Zichen slowly approached, but the overgods stared at him vigilantly. You've won. You can leave now. Contrary to the overgod's expectations, Yi Zichen didn't break the overgod's original rules and attack him. Instead, he really did disperse the arena and let the overgod leave. The overgod was delighted to have survived, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't bring himself to smile. He'd only survived by stepping over the corpses of others, including his own older brother. Star Lord Yi, I'll be back. The surviving overgod gnashed his teeth and took to the skies, But at that moment Yi Zichen's gaze froze. Before the overgod could fly more than a few hundred meters, dong! The overgod's godhead shattered and fell from the sky. At the same time, Yi Zichen bit his finger and slammed it against the ground. The barrier was completed in an instant. At the same time, the sky above the barrier darkened, leaving only a tiny sliver of light. In that tiny sliver of light, Yi Zichen could see a black-robed Yale slowly walking toward Yi Zichen, as if he were taking a flight of stairs. 1,000 meters away, the black-robed Yale laughed arrogantly.